12-year-old was on Christmas break from school and decided to sleep in my bed with me the night before to watch a movie. When I got up for work in the morning, I left him to sleep in my bed. It's a small, safe town and he's responsible. So I didn't have any issue leaving him for the few days I still had to work before leaving for Christmas holidays. I had been at work for an hour when he texted me and told me someone was in the house. I immediately thought he was one of our friends dropping off Christmas baking or something, and texted back, "Who is it?" And he responded, "I don't know. They told the dogs not to bark and wake me up." I thought that was odd, so I drove home and checked around not seeing anything. Went to my room and he was covered up in the blankets. I got him out of bed. He's telling me he saw someone. Didn't hear a word. So I brought him upstairs to check the cameras. Once upstairs waiting for the camera recordings to load, he went to the washroom. I never would have cleaned him, so I thought I'd better check the closet in my room. Then he walked in the closet. As soon as I walked in the closet and turned the light on, I saw him hiding in the corner. I was immediately frightened. I yelled at him and called the police. I waited with him while he brought back and was sitting on the floor for the police to come. I wasn't sure what he was on, but he wasn't aggressive for it. Police arrested him, and once he was back at the detention, he attacked a female cop and tried to get down to shoot her. Once it was all over, I figured something was going to get on my feet. I had to push myself to check his spot, and I was fighting every time I went in the closet to tell me the brand he wasn't there. It's 3 a.m. My bedroom door is half open and my fiancé is in the basement. I see people and I saw him open the door. Then that person walked into my bedroom. It was an old person with a little bed, sitting at 3 years old. The helium had leaked just enough to make it so sick to my house, and I finally made it. My heart was racing just coming up. This weekend, I found out that there was a touch with my house. For days before I was just on the highway, there was a massive pavement in front of me, and I see this huge slab of ice fly off the top of the trailer. It was this enormous piece, looked at least 5 feet by 5 feet. The way it flew off the top of the trailer, it caused some wind and rumble from around the hill. I immediately noticed the piece was going to come down directly onto my windshield. The highway was full of cars, so swerving to avoid the ice wasn't an option, and being that I was carrying horses and pulling a trailer, a sudden movement would risk me losing control. I sat there staring at this huge piece of ice, knowing in a few seconds it would come crashing down onto my windshield. I just hoped for the best and hoped it wouldn't smash through. My brother was sleeping in the back, and when it hit, it made one of the loudest noises I've ever heard, immediately waking him up. And when it hit, it made one of the loudest noises I've ever heard, immediately waking him up. And when it hit, it made one of the loudest noises I've ever heard, immediately waking him up. And when it My brother was sleeping in the back, and when it hit, it made one of the loudest noises I've ever heard, immediately waking him up. Luckily, it didn't shatter the windshield. It did, however, rip off the side mirror on the left side of the car. It was very scary. I consider myself very lucky that it didn't end up way worse. When I was around 5, my parents got a divorce. At the time, I didn't know what was going on, so I wasn't really upset. Soon after that, me, my brother, and my sister had to move out with our dad. We found a house down the street for $500 per month. It was around 125 years old. We started to move in, and I thought it was creepy. Soon after, I got used to how creepy it was, and I could easily fall asleep on my previously. Anyways, one night I randomly woke up and just thought go to my brother's door. I went outside my room, stared at his door. A few seconds passed, and a big, skinny, tall creature opens and ducks under the door, and we just stare at each other. We also have 10 feet high ceiling, and its head was really close to touching me. After a few more seconds, I get scared and just walk calmly into my room and go to bed. I almost fall asleep instantly and wake up a few seconds later, and it's morning. If you want to know what he looked like, think of a realistic Minecraft enderman. I didn't see what I'm about to tell, and that made it worse. About 3 years ago, I moved into a new house. It was completely empty, and that made every sound very loud inside the house. It was a huge, old house in a nice neighborhood. At the end of the day, I got into my room, closed the door, and went to sleep a little bit afraid because of some steps and doors closing sounds, but I convinced myself that they were coming from the neighbor's house, even though they felt right outside my bedroom door. The night went on, and I suddenly heard a woman screaming her lungs out in a very, very powerful way. My heart was bursting out, my body felt cold and numb, and then those screams became worse. She was yelling with all her strength, "WHO's there? WHO's there? WHOs. And then sudden silence. I thought about screaming back offering help, but then I thought that maybe those screams were from inside my house. I could swear they came from inside, and that if I made any sound, I would attract this possible intruder to me, or I might even put that woman in even more danger. I did nothing but lay frozen on my inflatable bed for 2 or 3 hours with my mind running like crazy, alert to call the police in case I heard another weird sound. It felt like forever. When finally the sun came out, I went out of my room with a tripod ready to attack. What a weapon. There was nothing in there. It was my second day at my new job and my coworkers thought I had a bad dream while I was lying. At that night, me and a friend asked a neighbor if she had heard those noises and she said no. In a very nervous way. My friend also believed that I had a bad dream and I started to think I was getting crazy or something. I was doubting about myself. 2 weeks later, 2 friends moved in with me. They didn't believe me. About a month later, I heard those screams again, felt the same freezing feeling, and a few seconds later, one of my roomies texted me confirming that she had heard the lady too. We kept listening to those screams for a couple of months after that, yelling different scary shit, never knew where they came from and what happened so fast. We couldn't record them to call the police with proofs. Warning, this is disturbing. This still haunts me to this day. Me and a buddy of mine went down this trail on our dirt bikes. We just got off the trail and headed back down the twisty road. We were having fun around the corners until we saw a cyclist walking down the road. At least that's what we assumed that he is judging from his gear. Me and my buddy both felt bad for the poor sap since we thought some punk stole his bicycle from him or something. So we pulled off to the side of the road. I noticed that his left thigh, bleeding profusely, we could see a big gash and could almost see the bone. We told him to sit down, and I took out my extra shirt from my backpack and wrapped it around his thigh while my buddy called for an ambulance. I kept asking the dude's name, but he wasn't talking properly, so I just assumed that he is in a lot of pain and is going through shock. I had first aid training, so I keep asking him what was his name. He never answered since the whole time I was talking to him he was looking straight along the road. 5 minutes later he told me to go check on his brother. I was wondering who he was referring to since he was the only cyclist we found, so I told him, "What's his number? Let me call him for it." He looked at me dead in the eyes and said he went down the Raven out of panic. I stood up and looked around. Sure enough, about 10 feet away I saw 2 broken bicycles that crashed on the metal barrier. I rushed to the scene and looked below the Raven and I saw a man, mangled beyond recognition. His spine was twisted to the left, and his head twisted to the right.
Oh yeah, he dead.
His eyes fixed on mine as I hear him whisper help and his eyes rolled on me.
Oh yeah, he dead. There's no
Ambulance
motherfucking
arrived. The guy on the Raven
bringing
died,
out dude
while
back.
the brother who had a broken leg survived. I never forgot their faces. To this day on, I always tell myself that all of that was just a dream. My buddy still has those pictures taken from his GoPro camera. This happened just a year ago. A few years ago, my family and I lived in a house with a rather large basement. Our basement had a door which led to a smaller room where my dad mainly kept his tools. When I was about 16, I went downstairs to get a textbook because I was working on a science project. This was about at 3 a.m. I went downstairs and turned the light on. While I was halfway down the stairs, the doorknob on the door which led to a smaller room started violently shaking. Whoever was trying to open the door couldn't because the door was locked. Then they banged on the door one time and stopped. I thought it could have had my brother or dad who probably got stuck in there, so I wanted to go check. But just in case, I went back upstairs to pick up my dad's hunting rifle. With my heart beating out of my chest, I opened the door and no one was there. This is impossible because there is no other way out of the small door other than that door. And even if the person who was violently shaking the doorknob opened the door and left, I would have seen him slash her while I was upstairs grabbing the rifle. My parents dismissed it as me hallucinating, but I know what I saw. Thankfully, we moved out a while back. By far the scariest moment of my life. I was dating this girl a while back and was staying at her parents' house. I remember one morning we got into a fight which caused her to storm out of the room and go into her living room to do her makeup and get ready. I stayed in her bed watching TV. Her bedroom door was open, and as I was watching TV, I saw what looked like a silhouette in the doorway, and of course, as I tried to focus on it, it disappeared. I didn't think too much on it and continued watching TV. A few minutes later, I hear footsteps coming from the hallway, assuming my GF was coming back to apologize, but no one actually came into the room. So I decided after 5 minutes of waiting I'd go to her. This is where it gets weird. I asked her why she went through the hallway, which she just responded with "I didn't," and looked at me confused. Then she said, "I thought that was you." A little freaked out, we actually forgot about the fight and comforted each other. We end up talking over the next 30 minutes, and we were on our phones a bit here and there, but decided to set them down on the coffee table to focus and talk about the fight. That's when my phone's ringtone was going off. In the room down the hallway. We both looked at each other and down at my phone just stopped. The second my phone ringtone ended in the other room, hers went off in the room. We left the house for the day. Luckily we were both ready anyways. We decided to go get food at Panera and mentioned I saw a silhouette in her room. That's when she asked if it was in the doorway. I know there will be skeptical people out here, but this is a 100% true story.
Yeah, no,
the house was new
fair.
when they moved in 12 years, and some changed prior to that day. The house was across from a Catholic church. I have worked in healthcare for about 6
That is
years
an
now.
instant desecration.
Dementia is so scary to watch. One week, my resident knows how to use a spoon. The next, he has forgotten. In cancer care, I learned how rapidly ovarian cancer can spread with little to no symptoms. There is no screening we can do for ovarian cancer. Cervical tumors the size of softballs on a 29-year-old cervix. And hospice and palliative treatment is really the only option. Now in the ER, how suddenly your life can end at the blink of an eye.
I am so
You're out grocery shopping one hour, and the next we are doing round after round of CPR on you, trying desperately to intubate you and get a pulse back. We're trying to get you to the cath lab as soon as we can, but you end up passing from a dissected aorta. Or maybe it's knowing how cruel the human brain is. 10-year-olds in foster care who are coming in for a psychiatric evaluation and are covered in self-harm scars. A 14-year-old who blew her face off with a hunting rifle, still conscious upon arrival.
Oh,
I had
shit.
just finished watching the
Damn.
series. My son, who was around 6 at the time, was asleep in his room. I could see his room and his/hid bed out of the corner of my eye from the couch I was sitting on. I was talking to my best friend on the phone and I see movement. I stopped talking, turned my head to the side to see him. He slowly sat up in his bed and slowly turned his head to face me. Just his head. His eyes were closed.
Oh.
It was especially terrifying because the entire movie I was thinking about how it weirdly was like my son. He had an unexplained coma for 12 hours, had night terrors and sleepwalking. He talked a lot about monster vision and at one point had an imaginary friend with no face that told him to hurt me. He's normal now and has, to my knowledge, not murdered anyone. Walking to my parking garage late at night, woman stopped me asking if I could give her a ride to buy milk for her new baby. No way was I going to go there. Politely declined, but still felt kind of bad. My parking garage stairwell had windows I could look out of. Decided to watch where she went next. She walked towards a set of dumpsters that I had passed by, and from behind them arose 2 men. They then walked down the alley together. Still wonder what they had in mind. If they were going to mug me, they had that opportunity as I passed by them before she stopped me. Possibly planned to steal my car since she asked for a ride. Either way, my stomach dropped when I saw them pop out from behind those dumpsters. I was traumatized last night, so I wake up at about 4 a.m. to my hand wiping something off my face. I must have instinctively done this and the action itself woke me. I hear a small tap as whatever it was fell to the floor. I'm still half asleep and think to myself, for some crazy reason, it must have been food stuck to my face from making broth before going to bed, like a bay leaf, and try to go back to sleep. I can't though because now that I'm awake I have to pee. So I go and also check my face for food. Nothing is there. Odd. I wash my face. Slowly I realize as to become more awake that it couldn't have been food because I washed my face before bed. I go back up to bed and get my phone to use as a flashlight, dread slowly filling me, to see what it was. I shine the light on the floor and there it is, a house centipede about 2 inches long with a gazillion legs. It then starts scaring and I yell obscenities repeatedly. I grab my house slipper and smash it before it can go somewhere unseen.
Really?
After 3 attempts I succeed. I then start inspecting the entire room. I pull the covers down and check under my pillow to see if there are more. No, thank God. I ripped the covers off my unsuspecting husband, but he was in the clear as well and remained completely undisturbed and oblivious. I checked the slanted ceiling because I suspect it was climbing on there and fell on my face. The thought that it actually crawled up my bed, over my hair, across my forehead is too terrifying to consider. With no indication that there were any others, I try to go back to sleep, holding my phone and checking the ceiling with the flashlight every few minutes. I eventually fell asleep a good hour or so later, but it wasn't a restful one. I constantly felt the need to wipe my face to feel safe. I have since learned, thank you Google, that they actually aren't dangerous to humans, don't even really ever bite us. Actually, they eat other pests, like roaches, silverfish, and wasps, that may be in your home.
Yes.
While that is great, They are extremely creepy and I don't appreciate their services in my bedroom whilst I am sleeping, or their company in my bed. That one has died for its transgressions against my house, and so will all others who dare show their presence.
Really?
Thank you for listening to my rant.
Don't kill spiders as well.
The story isn't too creepy, but it scared the shit out of me.
Spiders are sacred.
So this happens when I was about 14, 15 years old.
All
My
spiders
dad,
are sacred.
sister, and I were on holidays in a rural town on the coast of Spain. We had gotten takeaway pizza for dinner and ate it at the beach.
Hello,
After sunset, we
viewers.
decided to go on a night walk and hopefully end back at the hotel. We followed this dirt road through the woods, which eventually lead to a quiet street where the town ended. Facing the woods, at the end of that street, there was a white van with sun reflectors and sheets covering the windows. I found that weird because it was the middle of the night, so there was no need to block out the sun or anything. A buff middle-aged man was standing right outside the sliding door with his hands crossed. The door was slit a crack open, and before he shut it I saw a woman on the floor of the van with a piece of cloth strapped around her neck. She was in distress, her eyes wide and her hair a mess. My heart dropped and I froze. I whispered to my dad, who was next to me, that there was a woman in the van, and he didn't believe me. I almost started crying on the spot. Once we were out of view of the van, my dad told me he believed me, but just didn't want the man to know we'd seen something. We went straight to the police station. I later found out that the cops went there immediately, and when they got there, there was no trace of the van. To this day, I still wonder what happened to that woman. A little boy in a
Welcome,
window.
Dad.
A long time ago, I was playing hide and seek with my neighborhood buds. I was counting against the tree next to my friend's grandma's window. I looked up and saw a boy around my age in the window looking right at me. He stared at me as I walked by. I waved, but he did not wave back. We finished playing about an hour later and went inside the grandma's house. I noticed a very large entertainment center blocking that window. No way in hell a person could be standing next to the window. I didn't see it initially because the curtain was closed, so the little boy was between the window and curtain. I told the grandma a few years later, and she confirmed that she had experienced paranormal shit many times in that house. She had her church come out and cleanse it, I guess, so she hasn't had any since. It was more weird than scary, but it's all I've got for scary shit. I've always wanted to write this story down. My grandfather was a Marine sniper in World War II. One of those crazy people who forged their birth certificate to go fight. Of course, those were different times, and I don't think I got many of his genes anyway. I was in high school at the time, as was my older sister. She was dating a real creep. The kind of creep that you want to do something about when you saw how he treated her. But you couldn't go to your parents, because she'd just been more mad with you. And you could go to him because, well, he's got 3 years of growth on you of puberty when that was pretty much a death sentence of a fight. He treated my girlfriend poorly enough that she got the message. She wasn't an idiot and finally just broke up with him. A few days later, my dad came home in a more somber and poignant mood than I remember, and told me to go to upstairs. What he didn't know is I could hear through the vent in my room, so I was able to hear their entire conversation. Long and the short of it is that the kid didn't take the breakup very well. So much so that he emailed my dad nude photos he'd taken of my sister. Then he explained how he was going to be sending them to the whole school. This was back when email was popular, that almost everyone, kids, even, had an AOL com account, and you could get them pretty easily through what was called their buddy list. The point is, this wasn't an infeasible idea. Cut forward to the next, and my parents were so distraught and trying to deal with the police, who said there was little they could do at that time. My grandfather shows up. In the chaos, they'd forgot he was visiting. My grandmother had passed years earlier, so we had him up as often as possible. My sister and I loved him very much. Well, Pop immediately understood something was wrong. All the faces gave it away pretty quickly. Asked his son, my dad, what was wrong? When he didn't get an answer all the way down the list, he picked me up and took me for ice cream, as my mother screamed from behind not to tell him anything. I never really saw my Pop angry. I think most grandkids don't see their grandparents angry, and it's what makes the relationship so wonderful. That is, until that day that I explained the situation to my grandfather. He very calmly got the details and then asked me where the kid lived. We drove to his house and my grandfather said that, no matter what happens, not to move from that seat and keep the doors locked. About 15 minutes later, Pop came back and we went back to my place. He said never to ask him
Hello,
about
viewer.
it. It wasn't until I was an older guy, I'm 33 now, that I found out what had happened from my parents, who had heard through the release report. My grandfather had interrupted their family dinner. He verified who they were and asked for the family to go upstairs save the father. He then pulled his pistol out of his back pants, put it in his father's mouth and explained the pictures. He said if anyone else ever saw those pictures, he'd come back and beat his son to death in front of him and they'd kill him too. Anyway, I do miss my grandfather sometimes. Once I had to get up really early in the morning to go on a trip one day.
Damn.
It was about 3:30 in the morning and I had forgotten to go and get gas for my car the night before. I stopped at a gas station about a mile away from my house because it was well lit and it was in a nicer area. Anyways, I was pumping gas and then I got the weirdest feeling that I needed to move. I moved behind my car and then away from it and then I noticed this huge guy hiding in front of my car. He was sneaking towards me when I got the urge to get away from my car.
Really?
I was completely alone and I'm just a small girl. I almost always have mace or something with me if I am by myself. This time I had a knife and pulled it out and started screaming bloody murder for him to get the hell away from me. Then he started moving closer around my car to me. I screamed even louder and an attendant came out who called the cops. Definitely one of the scariest moments of my life. Was recent actually. I'm usually a deep sleeper but last week got woken up to my bedroom door being swung open. What officially woke me was the sound of the slam. My eyes shoot open not knowing what to expect, grabbing my gun just in case someone sees me. I see my sister-in-law come walking in slowly and I call out to her nothing. Still watching as she walks to the right corner of my room where I just so happen to have my rifle hanging there. She faces them then like in some demon-possession horror film, walks awkwardly backwards back to her bed, grabbing her blanket and covering up all the cracks, taking her stare away from my room. Woke up my brother who was like that she usually sleepwalked without missing deep dumps up wide awake, tried to wake up his wife but she's dead asleep only moments get away. Honestly, it was something I never expected to experience. I was helping block the road on a 2-lane highway so that they could clear an accident. It was just me and a friend controlling traffic when everyone else was investigating and helping clear it. We arrived in the middle to relive the shift before us, so by the time most of it was clear and the mother were in the hospital already. After a while there one of the guys came up to us and told us he'd get the order to open up the road in like 30 seconds. I shit you not, the exact moment he finished his sentence we heard a loud impact with the sound of breaking glass and metal hitting metal, immediately followed by a long, terrible grinding noise and tire screech. I turn toward the sound and what I see is one new Toyota Corolla that is jerking all around the road and another older controls model behind it moving the same direction but a little slower and facing the opposite way from where it's moving. Almost immediately the older car just raises its nose as the rest drops below the little hill we're all on. And I realize it's off the road and it just missed a light poles and dropped over from the little rise that this part of the road is on. I know the area so I know it's not a huge drop, but still, maybe 2 meters or something like that. The guy who came up to me and my friends in charge, he tells us to keep the road blocked and starts running. After a while, when everything calms down, I ask him to go see the damage. The newer model car isn't too bad. Its trunk is all smashed up and the passenger side rear door won't close. The interesting thing is both right side tires are blown. I had the driver keep it straight and stopped it, but she made a really good job. The second car was over the edge upside down in a ditch. The passenger compartment forked perfectly into the ditch while the hood and the trunk rested on the sides of that ditch, keeping it lifted from the ground and preventing it from being crushed completely. The officer there tells me there was 4 people in that car, all lightly injured. If that car had landed a meter further than or closer to the road, there would be 4 dead. Having just passed my driving test a little before that, it really gave me perspective of how important it is to focus on driving and avoid distractions. When I saw that car lift its front up in the air, I was sure it was going to get wrapped around that white pole. This shit is no joke, people. I see how many of you are on the phone, or even reading or writing stuff while driving. It ain't worth it, not at all. If you can't wait, then stop at the shoulder. And if you can't focus on driving, only driving, don't get a driver's license. This is going to sound like a joke, but what I'm about to describe genuinely terrified me. He-Man used to be one of my favorite heroes. There was even a time, back when I was in kindergarten, that I insisted on wearing my suspenders in an X-shape, in an effort to emulate Prince Adam style. That all changed one fateful evening, though. I had been gifted a battery-operated replica of He-Man's sword, which sported several buttons that would play various sounds or possibilities. There was also a piece of the weapon firing smack someone. At least until your mother shouted that you to stop liking the furniture. The sword also had a rather nightmare uses, because it's never through you have to put the blade to a powered down sequence. However, if the batteries were already running low, it could actually get stuck during that process, which would leave it emitting a pale, ominous glow and a deep, creepy road. This, combined with the fact that the sword would attempt to power down automatically after a few minutes of activity, meant the Toro is a perfect device for scaring children who are trying to go to sleep. Here's what happened. I'd been playing with my He-Man sword one evening, when my mother finally got fed up with my antics and sent me to bed. Upon arriving in my room, I put the weapon in one corner of my bedroom, turned off the light, and crawled beneath my covers. That's when I heard it. A low, evil moan drifted through the night, accompanied by a sickly yellow moan. I jumped up out of bed and stared, wide-eyed, at the source of the disturbance.
Oh shit. Oh shit.
I jumped up out of bed and stared, wide-eyed, at the source of the disturbance. The sword flickered in the darkness, its mocking snarl like a promise of impending doom. I bolted for my room, screaming for my parents. My father, who had only just arrived at home, took it upon himself to first reassure me, then remove the batteries from the haunted hole. You can imagine the horror I felt when the sword kept glowing and browning for even after the source of the fire had been cut off. After that night, I didn't like He-Man much anymore. 2 summers ago, some friends and I took our boat to a trip where everyone jumped in. There was a decent-sized group already there jumping and having a good time. There was an older uncle of the young, probably 10 years old, wearing a life jacket trying to muster the courage to jump. The cliff is about 15 to 20 feet, so a decent drop for a first time. He hesitated a few times and eventually jumped. We all cheered as he finally jumped, and we heard the typical splash. A few seconds went by and walked to the edge to look down to make sure I was clear to go and see this kid face down floating in water.
Oh, he did.
Instant panic / adrenaline. This kid in adrenaline. The young man said, "Oh shit, watch out." In those few seconds, time moved incredibly quickly. I can distinctly remember basic planning and very basic actions falling through the air. Hit water, grab him, flip him over, CPR. He just popped his head up. Oh, thank God. He's okay. What? I hit the water, swim to the surface. It turned out he had already surfaced and was pretending to be dead as a joke between the time he hit the water and I went to scared the shit out of me. This is not something I've really experienced. Around 2 years ago, my best friend, her mom, and her sister took a road trip to Idaho to go camping and reconnect with each other and ourselves. My friend's family were super into road trips and frequently went camping. We were originally from Oklahoma, so none of us really had any experience camping in mountains, but we were pretty confident that we would be okay. We stopped at a cool place because we had pretty safe places to camp. We were still in the city and it was more like people brought their RVs and stuff and watched TV instead of traditional camping. We wanted a real, even the woods type of camping where we go through the camp just kind of looking around and this guy waves us over. It was pretty forceful when he asked my friend to do it. He leans on the car window and looks in at each of us. He says that people live there and we better be careful driving around and looking at people's houses. She tells him we're looking for a place to camp. He leans back off the car and says, well, you can't stay here. We'll pull up. But if you're looking for somewhere more remote, you can go up the road, around 40 miles from town, up into the mountains. There's camping grounds there. And you won't have to pay like you would here. We say, okay, thank you, and head up. When we leave, he tells us to be careful. So we drive up into the mountain and find a nice little camping area next to a stream. You can see our campsite from the road, but you can't really see the road from the campsite unless you're looking through the trees. We haven't seen anyone or any other cars since we left the coast. We drove all the way up to the top of the mountain and then back down to our area. There will be people all over, but it's not skiing season yet, so it's perfect. Exactly what I was doing. We spent a chance with my friend and I go surfing the mountains. We find some horse tracks there. And there were no horses there. Out of pure psychology, no buckets, in the middle of nowhere, in a desert state, there was no such thing. The stream would cover any sound of people outside our tent and the pair of horses rode with no tracks. This unsettled my friend so much. As the sun began to set, I started to get the nervous. I don't believe in anything like that, so I just tell myself that the feeling I'm having is for my anxiety. But it's different. It's like a gut-wrenching feeling that I've never had before or since. We lay down to go to sleep and I'm trying to sleep. I turn to the wall and I do not shake the sleep. I see my friend. He's She's also lying. I say, are you okay? And she says, yeah, I just feel weak. At this point, this feeling is so relief that I have to sit up. Everything in my body is saying to me to get out of this tension of one house. I tell my friend and my family that I'm going to go sit in the car because I'm cold. My friend says she'll come with me. So we both go sit in the car. It's about 2 a.m. Talking about random stuff, and finally she says she thinks she'll be able to go to sleep. So I let her sleep in the passenger seat, while I just look around and try to place this feeling of happiness. The moon is unbelievably bright that night, and I'm just looking up through the sunroof and enjoying the sun. The feeling is starting to slowly subside, and start to run out. I'm literally just falling asleep while enjoying the trip. It felt like I had been electrocuted. I sit straight up and look around, certain that someone will be standing outside the door, ready to kill me. Nothing. No one. I could not shake this feeling. I tell myself I can fix myself out and force myself to do that. As soon as my head hits the headrest, I see a pair of headlights driving up the road. Okay. Weird. We haven't seen anyone else in probably 14 minutes. And this person is driving around a straight across the road. I watch them pass the entrance for a campsite, and I'm just about to get out of the car to go through the receiver reverse lights, and then headlights coming down the entrance. I shoot my friend a look and say something to me. We need to leave. Now. She wakes up and knows as I'm talking very fast with tears streaming down my face. I don't even remember the name of the truck. I have never been that afraid before. I didn't know who slash what was in that truck, but I was convinced that she stayed to find out that we would never be driving again. We both and pulled into the vacant campsite next to ours. It's hard to see through the trees, but we see several people get out of the truck. At this point, we realize we have nothing to defend ourselves with. We don't even have a car. The only option is to get out of the car, go wake up my mom and sister, and leave. I open my door as silently as possible because we hear the light come on and we both stay put. We run to the tent and wake them up saying, someone is here in the truck. We have to leave that here. We need to go. Her sister gets out of the tent, upset and all over me. She takes one look at my face and starts begging. The sight took around an hour and a half to set up in about 15 minutes to the tent. We leave it as soon as we turn down the main road. I can have a whole night to look at our apartment. We slept in the hotel that night and found a campsite with more people and cell phone reception to finish our weekend camping. I've never felt that feeling since, and I still don't know what caused me to jolt awake before I saw the movie. We joke now that they were probably afraid we camped alone, so set up camp next to us, only to have us freak out, pack up, and leave them there alone. This one is more paranormal than the other. Story 1. I'm about 5 at the time. This is truly unoccupied camp forest throwing slurs at me. I don't really remember if it said something like this. You will never resort to anything you fucking piece of shit. After all of this ends, I go in my parents' room and violently shake my dad in order to wake him up. He thinks I'm a robber and grabs me by the shirt. This was in self-defense. My dad is in no way, shape, or form abusive. Figuring out it was me, he puts me down and wants me sleeping. Now for story 2. This one takes place about a year ago, where I was once again trying to sleep through the night. When I get up, I see a pop-looking blob. It wasn't a liquid-looking material, it looked more like baby scribbles, emitting a scraping noise. Me thinking that it was like one of those things that you see in the corner of your eyes, I blink only for it to move to the other side of my room. So I blinked again, and now it's at the foot of my bed, and he freaking out blinks again.
Fucking
now, on my bed, I blink for a final
bitch.
time, and it disappears. I was driving from Colorado to Las Vegas after several days of snow in the region. Everything had been going relatively smoothly until around 10 p.m. when I pressed the hill to find a line of cars waiting at a red light around 50 yards or so downhill from it. Turns out construction had forced about a quarter mile of the 2-lane highway down to 1 lane, with each direction taking a lane for 10-minute intervals. I quickly press on the brakes, but nothing happens. Not a damn thing. I'm heading toward half a dozen cars at 50 miles per hour with no brakes. To my left is a colossal rock block. Not an option. To my right is steep drop with only a small bank of snow between it and the roadway. Also not an option. As I continue to accelerate toward the line of cars in front of me, I realize that I'm not stopping safely. My car and most likely my body are not coming out of this unscathed, but I still need to try to avoid hurting anyone in front of me. I make a split-second decision that I'm going to ever so slightly bank to the right as I near the car in front of me, enough to avoid a collision, but hopefully not enough to send it down a cliff. 5 yards from the last car in line, I put my plan in action, oversteering by about 15 degrees. I'm going down the cliff and that's that. Until I jump. I just stopped. Not violently, because I hadn't hit anything other than snow. In fact, I had broken through the entire width of the snow, mere inches from my front wheel surpassing the edge of the cliff. Nothing physical had stopped me. I just stopped. I'm not a religious man by any means, but that day I swear my car was stopped by the touch of angel.
Hells no. Angels are the ops. Forever going to be the ops. After all, they are the enslavers of men. The Abrahamic religions are filth. All of it equals trash and the shit that comes out of my asshole. What the fuck? Up too late. Come here. Hey! Come here, Joey. Come here, Joey kitty. Come here. Come here. Yeah, there you go. This is for kitty to make with Malmino. Wow. Come here. Oh damn, this is a little down bad shit. Yeah, this is a little down bad. No. Yeah. There you go. There you go, Joe.
If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what's the creepiest / most unexplainable thing that you've ever experienced? In 2015, I had just started a business with my brother flipping houses. He had been on a road trip with his daughter for a little over 1 week and had just gotten back home. I spoke with him on the phone and he said that he would be down to meet me at the property that we had just remodeled that Friday to finish it up and get it listed. When I hung up the phone, I was walking into the kitchen when I thought to myself, he isn't coming because he is going to have a heart attack and die tomorrow. I have been scolded in the past for being negative, and so I just kept it to myself and tried to put it out of my mind. The following day I was sitting on the edge of my bed when my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and it was my mother. I immediately knew what the phone call was going to be about. I picked up the phone and my mother said that my brother had just had a heart attack and they were trying to revive him. She said she would call me back. I knew without a shadow of doubt that he was already gone. I walked into the kitchen and stood there in a daze. I looked up at the wall where the late afternoon sun was casting a bright spot and found myself staring at it. It seemed to get brighter and wider, and in an instant it had surrounded me and was holding me.
Hello, viewers.
I wasn't scared. I just stood there letting the bright light envelope me. Just as quickly as it happened, it was gone and I was brought back to reality by the sound of my phone ringing. I realized I had been holding my breath in answer. It was my mother saying that he had died. To this day, I cannot explain this. When my brother was about 7 years old,
you were an
he woke up
oracle
one
of
day
that
acting
moment
really
there.
strange and didn't get out of bed. My mother went in to check on him and he started sobbing.
The
It was
void
awful and
works
he
in
sounded so
very,
full of despair.
very,
It wasn't the cry of a 7-year-old. He was so upset and it really
ways.
worried us both. My mother kept asking, "What's wrong? You can tell me." And after a long few minutes, he finally confided in her. He told her that he had been living the same day over and over and over and that it was always the same. But that's not what upset him. What made him cry was that today was the first day in a really long time where something had changed. We never spoke about it again. He was seemingly fine after a few days, but I still have no idea what happened. I know my brother, and it's not something he'd come up with out of the blue. Completely unexplainable from my perspective. It happened this past Saturday. Actually,
quantum
my parents live
time
about an
loop
hour away in bumfuck nowhere. There's
like
a hiking
that.
spot I love, especially around this time of year, on the way. So I stopped there around 9 a.m. The trail was temporarily closed and no other cars were there, so I
lay on my lap.
some pictures of the foliage. All of a sudden,
Viewers, I got a kitty cat on my lap.
I immediately got back in my car and locked the doors. He then walking up the path on the highway. He doesn't say anything, just stands in front of my vehicle and motions for me to get out. I started my engine, naturally, and he didn't budge. I shakily gasped, maneuvering past him through the grass. Not really eventful, but I was quite shaken up. I'm a 90-pound woman. Never been to the middle of the woods alone again, especially miles from civilization. With usually my Navajo family in the res earlier this year. Me and my cousin went out for the night. Always a bad idea. It's mostly mountain life and his dad's broken down car. We were talking deeply about how different life is out in the city versus on the reservation, and in the middle of the conversation we both heard footsteps in the dirt coming towards us. We weren't scared at first because we just assumed it was his girlfriend coming to join us.
No, it's not
that. The car to look, there was nothing. Nobody. That's what we call a yeni, or more commonly known as a skinwalker.
Yeah, could we like not? I really don't want a skinwalker to show up.
Very common there. We had just come home from a long Easter Sunday at my bills. The kids were tired and we needed to get up early for work at daycare, so we were hurrying to unload the car and get them into bed. I ran upstairs and got the baby out of the fridge. My husband was unloading and parking the car, etc.
But a
When I returned to get my
skinwalker
son to put him to
equals
bed next, for reasons I can't
no.
explain, instead of taking him upstairs, I just walked over and turned on the TV and Peter Pan was playing that night. The old one was very much. So we happened to know that we were on the couch in the dark hour watching the show. My husband came in and asked me what I was doing. Why did I turn on the TV when we needed to get into bed? I really couldn't explain my impulse, and I just told him not to worry about it, to get him down in a little while. And we kept watching TV. As time went by, my husband was more and more concerned about how late it was getting and why I wouldn't put our son to bed. He kept asking me to turn off the TV and take him upstairs. The more upset he got, the more stubborn I became about not taking him upstairs. I knew this made no sense as we both knew he needed to go to sleep. We were usually very strict about bedtime and we were way past our son. We rarely let the kids watch TV. So my husband was right to be upset with me as I was behaving very uncharacteristically. But in spite of his pleading with me, I just wouldn't budge. It was baffling for me as well as my husband. It was like part of me knew he was totally right and the other part of me was helpless to explain why I was behaving so oddly and was so determined to keep him downstairs and not take him upstairs. Just as my husband started to get really frustrated with me, we heard a huge crash upstairs. We looked at each other and both ran to the stairs and saw what looked like a white cloud roiling at the top of the stairs and starting to come down the stairs.
Spirit.
We both thought something had happened in the baby's room, like her crib had collapsed or something large had fallen in her room.
Nope.
So we raced upstairs and found she was fine. Still asleep and nothing in her room was disturbed. But in my son's room, we saw the cloud of white dust still coming out the door. We looked inside and saw that his entire plaster ceiling had collapsed. Only wooden lat remained. And big heavy chunks of thick plaster had fallen all over his bed. It was covered. One big piece was lying on his pillow right where his head would have been had we put him to bed when we got home. He would have most likely been killed. Or very seriously injured. But instead he was downstairs watching Peter Pan and Wendy. To this day I can't explain why I turned on the TV or refused to put my son to bed as expected. Or why I became more and more stubborn as my husband begged me to stop the madness and get back on track.
Protecting
There was a very strong force in me at the time that I really couldn't override even though I knew that what I was doing made no logical sense. But whatever it was, it saved my son's life. And my husband and I were both extremely thankful. Nothing like that has ever happened to me since then. My son is now 38 with 2 young sons of his own. The one and only
without that ancestry spirit taking care of you.
I cherish. It was the middle of the night and I could have sworn I was laying awake in my bedroom for a long while. My wife was leaning towards me and snoring softly and otherwise being endearing. She started whispering unintelligibly in her sleep, which I thought was adorable until it suddenly became rhythmic, like a soft chant. The accordion door on my closet creaked open slowly, and out stepped a tall, dark, demonic-looking thing.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
petrified and completely paralyzed as this thing crept closer, all while my wife is still whisper chanting inches from my ear. I blinked and it was over, just like that. I was just awake in my room, my wife snoring quietly.
Hells yeah.
I felt like I was in shock for hours afterward. Was a summer camp counselor when I was in my late teens. Wake up in the middle of the night having to piss.
Hey,
so I climbed out of my bunk and
ASI.
leave the cabin. Not gonna walk a quarter mile to the bathrooms, so I peel it out and piss on the back wall of the cabin. The front faces out into the big open courtyard. The back is against the tree line. Not long after it's blowing, I hear a bit of laughter. 2 kids giggling and whispering to each other. No big deal, there are like 250 kids here for the session. There was a pair of troublemakers in the cabin over for mine, so I figure it's them.
Ooh, that smells
My
good.
first thought, however, is to make sure whoever these kids are don't
What the
stare
fuck is
directly
that?
into my penis. So I start to waddle around the far corner, and once I'm there, I
What?
peek around in curiosity. I watch 2 kids, 8 years old or so, walk down from between the 2 cabins into the wooded area. It's dark out, so I wasn't able to identify the campers, but all I'm sure of is a couple kids left their cabin for some late night shenanigans. Again, no biggie, I used to get into the same shit as a camper. I finally finish relieving myself, tuck her up, and walk out from behind the cabin towards the trees, shrouded in darkness, where I had just watched these 2 road campers escape too. By now, the laughing has stopped, and I'm soaked in the silence of upstate Michigan wilderness. There's just nothing I know I can found, except for myself, who at this point is starting to freak out again. As my eyes dart around, I quietly call out to the kids I know are there. I know they are, because I saw them. I must have spent an hour freaking through the road, and out to the other side where there is a massive open grass compared to a 5 or 10 football field. The silence is deafening and I start to cry. Not because I can't find the kids, but because I'm realizing there may have never been any kids to begin with. I just sat out there for another 30 minutes or so.
Of some children.
Told myself I was waiting for them to pop out from the dugout behind the archery target. but really I think I was just too scared to move a muscle in that moment. I know how powerful it is, especially in the sleepy state I was in.
No,
But I also know what I heard and know what I thought was meant. Over a decade later, I still have trouble explaining this to myself with any sort of rational way. This is an incident that happened to my family when we were young. We come from a family of healers and sensitives with Irish and Spanish heritage, so we have had supernatural experiences all of our lives. This was just one more unexplained, slightly creepy event that I remember. The more interesting part, true if made up, is the old wives' tale behind the event. We were about 8 or 9 the day Mum took Elle and I over the heath. It was a hot and bright day in the middle of the summer holidays. We had been collecting natural materials to make a collage when we got home and Mum's rucksack was full of stray feathers, wild grasses, leaves and twigs, and we were on our way home where Gran was making a cheese flan and salad for dinner.
Ooh.
As we were all very hot and slightly tired, Mum had decided that we would wade through the river instead of going back over the hill we lived at the time. The thought of pushing my tiny wheelchair through the muddy bottom, we tangled really never seemed to faze my mom. She was a healthy, fit 26-year-old and knew the heath like the back of her hand. The river wasn't very deep at that part. Someone took my wheelchair back, pulled Elle over the hand and we went. The water immediately soaked our clothes through it. Elle and I started to scream, giggle and splash each other in sheer delight. Then we saw them. Weeds, flowing with the current of the river, swaying back and forth like a woman's long tangle, unkempt hair, and I got the distinct impression that she saw citizens at that. I glanced at Elle and instantly knew that she was having the same uncanny notice. The weeds started to curl around our legs and the wheels of my wheelchair, making our progress a little more laborious, and our previous screams of playful fun changed to moans and squeals of unease and disgust as we felt the weeds gently tugging our legs. At no point did Mom ever look anxious or fazed by this experience. She just kept saying, "It's only water weeds, you see. Come on, don't be silly. You've seen them looking for you." We finally reached the other side of the river, and as Mom dragged my wheelchair back to the riverbank, Elle climbed up it and sat down beside me. We both just stared silently at the river and the sea of green for what felt like the longest time. But in actual fact, it was only 10 minutes before walking the rest of the way home. That night, after a hot bubble bath and cheese flan salad, in our flannel pajamas and slipper socks around the fire drinking hot tea, we told Gran about our adventure. Our Gran took a sip of tea from the mug and told us the story of Green Hair. She had been a real person though her real name had been forgotten by Gran, conveniently Elle and I thought. Anyway, she had lived in the village around 1912, before the area was built up and modernized and developed into what it has become. She was young and kind, with a pretty face and beautiful long blonde hair, a daughter of a gentleman farmer, and was deeply in love with a handsome, young soldier. They were to get married, but before they could, the Great War broke out and her young man was called up to fight. He was killed by a hand grenade on the front line, and when she found out she was widowed before she even became a wife, she lost the will to live, and driven by grief-stricken insanity, she went to the same river that we waded through, and she threw herself in. The river was as wild as the land at that time, and by the time her body was discovered, it was blue, bloated, and half-eaten by fish. Her long corn-colored hair had become blinding over the long strand of evil-smelling river weeds which clogged and choked the bed of the river. In fact, the pathologist who performed the post-mortem said that the body may have been found sooner if not for the dark green weeds that appeared to have curled around her limbs and torso, anchoring her close to the river bed for days. From that time onwards, it was said that that river was haunted, cursed, or both, anyway an extremely bad place. People claimed to see the spirit of the young woman kneeling beside the river and weeping bitterly. More commonly, people often saw the body of the girl floating on top of the water, with long green hair/weeds streaming out behind her, and so she was given the name of Green Hair. Elle and I asked Gran why we hadn't heard this story before. Gran just smiled and said because it was an age ago, even before she herself was born. The area was developed and built up and the river was tidied up and reconstructed, and along with it the tragic tale of Green Hair was lost in the stream of past. We didn't altogether believe Ron's morbid tale, but when Elle and I talked about it in bed that night, neither of us could dismiss the eerie feeling that we saw green hair flowing in the river that day. My friends and I went to go drive around the abandoned buildings, partially open for schools and the film industry, but otherwise boarded up with steel slashwood on every entrance. Riverview Hospital, if you're interested. We never left the car, but I had an urge to lower the window. It's October in Canada, so it's by no means warm. I quickly rolled it back up. I ended up at home just before midnight. We have a husky/wolf hybrid who greeted me and came to sleep with me that night. I crawled into bed and he jumped in bed, stood over me, stared at my nightstand and growled. I never. He didn't stop. I pushed him and he was rigid. He would not stop. He would not move. Now, anyone who owns/at a dog knows that they growl and bark differently depending on what they are doing. This was a noise I'd never heard from an animal in my life. It was a protective growl. A warning. Suddenly, he stops. Acts like nothing happened and curled up at the foot of the bed. Cut to, months later, a friend is over. This friend I told the story to happened to think I was lying to try and scare her. She's playing with the dog, sitting on the floor with her back against the bed, back to the nightstand. Dog is running in and out of the room multiple times. As I am out of the room, he rushes in, stops dead, stares at the same corner, and proceeds to growl such a menacing growl. She tried to push him to get him to stop, called his name. Nothing worked. He stops, just as quickly as he started and resumes playing. She never doubted his case. I always say our brother goes home with me that day. I have never heard him or any other dog make that noise. I cannot stress that when I pushed him he was so rigid, like a column immovable, standing over me. He was in a trance. It scared me. It scared my friend. I was 17 and the oldest of four and lived on the far end of the house next to the garage. I liked it over there because it was quiet and dark and I had space away from everyone. When I slept at night, I'd occasionally leave my door half open and let the light from the laundry room shine a night light into my room. One night, I did exactly that around 10 p.m. and cozied up into bed. From the orientation of the bed, I would actually face the door laying down, and there was no other way to do it. I hadn't quite closed my eyes yet when my bedroom door slammed closed. I didn't think much of it. I actually thought my brother was playing a prank on me. At this point I should say that when the door is closed, I could see absolutely nothing in my bedroom at all, and this was before cell phones, so I couldn't exactly shine anything to see what was going on. I said something like "not funny, Eric," thinking that he was on the other side of the door playing a prank. As soon as I finished saying that, I heard loud crinkles of paper. If you grew up with 2 decades ago, it's the same type of thin paper that you used to get from grocery store bags before they switched to plastic. You know how something is loud enough and so it's safe to find it, I didn't know exactly what I was going for. It was just like that in the center of the room. It lasted about 4 to 5 seconds. Now I'm starting to sweat bullets and trying to pray that it's my brother just really committed to a joke. About 15 to 30 seconds pass of dead silence, and I muster up the courage to jump to my feet, rush to the light, and flip it on. There was absolutely nothing on my bed before the could have made that sound. I stepped under my bed, and in the closet was there, and nothing. I marched out to the other side of the house, and all my clothes were on the floor. I asked everyone the following morning if they had closed my door, and none had. Could never quite explain what happened, but several other weird things happened at that house over the next few years. The most eerie of which was from my sister who complained of a tall man who would visit her at night through the walls. Gives me goosebumps having it out than 20 years later. I used to work as an assistant in an old mansion that was converted into an art museum in New England. The basement and old kitchen quarters were turned into a museum shop with back wings being more smaller galleries. The serpent staircase opened into a very narrow hallway that led towards the back rooms of the basement, or to the front of the shop all beneath ground level. The stairs were kept locked from everyone except staff, and the only way to the basement was to enter from the outside courtyard through a door that was right beside the shop counter. In front of the counter was an old TV mounted in the upper corner that showed security cameras to the back galleries, but the camera switched only when motion was detected in the area. It's a late winter night. I am staying late doing homework while the owners are in New York. The only other person in the building should be the house manager, who I know is working on the 4th floor. I am hanging out at the shop counter in the basement when I hear some noise in the back galleries. I assume it's a patron who is making their way out, but no one comes out from the hallway. So I call down to the back that the museum is closed, and I'd be happy to show them out the back way. No answer, but now the security camera starts switching to different empty galleries. Only slightly on edge, I pick up the phone to call up to my manager, and on the opposite of the shop counter, a revolving card stand full of classic postcards starts slowly turning. I think the look on my face is more surprised.
You better know he's dead.
It's a heavy, old stand, and it takes some force to get it going, but when the turning of the stand abruptly stopped and began going the other direction, I know right out of bed. One time when I was 17, my girlfriend at the time, and I was laying in bed. She was sleeping, and I was just laying there cuddling her. We were facing towards my window with the bedroom door on my back. This was close. It was pitch black. I wasn't on my phone or anything, just laying there. All of a sudden I felt something touch my shoulder. Not just a light touch, but it felt like a physical person had touched me. It scared the shit out of me. I jumped up and shot down towards the end of my bed. I looked behind me and nothing was there. I ran to turn on the lights. And my girlfriend asked me what was wrong. I told her what happened and she told me right before it happened she was having a dream. In the dream she was looking at us in the third person and saw someone behind me. In her dream the person touched me. As soon as it did in the dream when it did in reality. Up to that point I already believed in the paranormal, but that experience definitely solidified it. Was back home from college during the holidays. Drove from dinner with my friend, Greg, back to his house, a very nice and large property in an almost secluded, wooded area. It's around 9 p.m. We park our car in the driveway and start walking toward the house. Sounds are coming from the shed and the light is on inside. Getting closer, it's clear that it sounds like a 1940s pair of baseball game blasting loudly from the radio. Greg starts laughing and says something like, "What the fuck is my dad doing?" I start laughing too, at the thought that Greg's dad is listening to a tape recording of an old baseball game this late at night, by himself in a shed. And very loudly at that. Like, too loud and if his hearing is going. We walk past the shed, down some way, into the house. Greg's dad is in the kitchen, in his pajamas. Greg says, "Dad, you left the radio on in the shed." A serious look comes over the dad's face. He asks Greg what he's talking about, so we all walk back up to the shed. Now, there are no sounds and the light inside is off. My immediate thought is that Greg and his dad are playing a joke on me. But the way the dad is acting says otherwise. The dad checks the shed, nothing. Back inside the house, Greg and his dad have a chat. Greg later tells me that his dad has been seeing some weird things in the shed. I get no additional explanation, and it's clear Greg doesn't really want to talk about it. I told some of our mutual friends about it, but each time it just sounds so cheesy and uninteresting. Anticlimactic, I know, but I'll never forget the unsettling feeling that passed between me, Greg, and his dad that night. My family has a ranch in California that has an apple orchard attached to it. When I'd stay there to visit family, my cousin would always tell me stories of things that had happened there since my last stay. Ghost sightings, voices, the usual stuff. Took it all with a grain of salt because, well, as a kid, your mind will play tricks on you, especially at 1
Nope,
a.m.
those are not.
The common story was about a demon that haunted the orchard and would chase you till you left the orchard. One night I was outside smoking a cigarette a little after midnight, staring out into the orchard when my cousin,
Just
24
quote-unquote imagination.
They invited me, but told them no thank you because of the 40 minutes later, I began to come away from that house and passed out howling in the house rambling about the giant bastard Jason. And for the rest of the night we heard what sounded like dog paws on wood floors the closest thing to tendency including the rest of the night. And when the sun came up it sounded like whatever it was ran off the side and landed pretty heavily on the ground. Never visited them again.
Bat-based infernal?
My brother and I were once watching a horror movie at around midnight.
That's cute.
Around halfway through, the unmistakable noise of a deep sigh coming from where my brother was sitting. I took it as nothing, but I did look over at him because I assumed it was him being bored of the movie or something. When I saw that he looked over at me at the same time, we knew neither of us had made the noise, but we both heard it. We paused the movie, rewinded it a few times, and replayed the last 30 seconds a few times to try to see if sound we heard had come from the movie. After being unsuccessful, we laughed it off and finished our movie. Later that night, while on complete opposite sides of the house, me downstairs, him upstairs, I heard the same noise again. I deep sighed racing behind the stone. Me, in absolute panic, I ran upstairs without even looking towards the source. Finding my brother who was just looking at me as if he was waiting for me to tell him what had just happened. Turns out he heard the same noise upstairs at the same time that I heard it downstairs. We tried recreating it without luck. We experienced it again a few weeks after that, but this time we were both in separate rooms from each other and both came out of the rooms at the same time after hearing movement downstairs. Sounded like small bare feet on hardwood floor. Yes, there is hardwood downstairs. We both stood there for a good 30 minutes while the sounds continued for at least 10 of those 30 minutes.
You're not gonna lay down on me
Finally,
anymore?
sometime after that, I had a solo experience where I was downstairs late at night and heard the same sign noise along with the same bare feet noise behind me. Needless to say, I got the fuck out of there and went to bed. It has been quite some time since either of us experienced anything, but him and I firmly believe it was paranormal in some way. I would have vivid dreams as a child, of flying over places I've never been before, cities, forests, oceans,
astral shit.
sunsets, you name it. If I wanted to look closer, I could dive closer. I could feel my whole stomach moving. Like the feeling you get when a plane takes off and lands. It used to feel so real, so
It is real.
I'd wake
It's
up
literally... You're in the Onero.
Who's into some weird famous, part owner kind of person. Anyways, she starts freaking out. Apparently she had a previous conversation with my father about my creepy sleeping habits. I would roam the house at night, enter his bedroom and stand at the end of his bed staring, sometimes growling words. My father does not, and I repeat, does not believe in ghosts ECT, but he told my auntie these are very creepy encounters indeed, and would give him chills, all hair stand up kind of thing. My auntie told me I needed to stop my vivid dreams, as she believed I was astroplaning, and whilst I was having the time of my life seeing things in my dreams, something more sinister was lurking in my nighttime body, walking around my house growling and spooking my father. Two unexplainable cases that still use me. I used to cycle to work and one day on...
I mean, there are some really,
I lived in a country where
there are some really strange things that are
since I was cycling
in the astral.
As I followed on my back,
I mean, I personally don't care.
smash pits and barriers into the cycle lane. The speed of cars going on the floor. I would have been dead if I didn't do something. Second case that I went to start. I was a new one until I was I was sat in bed nursing my premature mom, so she was fine. When I answered up and fell asleep, super dangerous. Suddenly a male voice told me to wake up and I felt a breath blow in my face. I woke up to see my baby in the light. Face paralysis was close to the toe. I had never been so scared in my life and was now very late in life. If I hadn't had no breath, I don't even want to think what could have happened. Every now and then I think about that male voice and want to thank the Lord for whatever. I don't stop looking at it, so scared for the minute for 3 weeks. I have a timestamp on even texting right like that in 4 hours when I did it. I confirmed that time in the car started off and walked off to the door was still there when I walked out my door to my home. I drove 25 miles from my parents' home to grab my laptop and was about 25 miles back home. I got home at 8:12 p.m. Dash clock at the car, cell phone, and every time in my apartment confirmed it. Some of those are animals, so it couldn't have been really happening. It can't be a prank. Nobody knows there's a watch in my nightstand except when I was watching the nightstand, so it's still not possible. I gave my phone to my all clocks still. The kitchen man. So in my old house we had a long hallway that I still was kitchen doorway in my bedroom. Since I was little there was an assistant had a phone over on the nightstand, and the 10-man sat behind me like 6 feet up, walking across the doorway. For some reason I thought it was just a thing only I saw, and as a kid I thought he was the little protector of the house and walking the kitchen out. Went over I guess it was just like especially sometimes when you were until my partner came to the house for the weekend and finally saw it. They came to talk to me saying about kitchen habits. I got worried and started walking to the kitchen and checking it, and when I saw the kitchen I felt intimated because I saw it almost every time heading that time. Then my partner pointed out that I told my partner that I've been seeing that since forever, so it's weird they can see it too. Still have no idea what it was, but our only guess is that since the house is old, we thought that maybe a mold or gas leak issue gets us to see weird shit. But even then I don't know how we could see it at the same time. I'm not one to believe in ghosts/shades, but after dealing with that since a kid, then having someone else see it too, I can see why people believe in ghosts. Was watching a movie in the basement of
Dude,
my parents'
it literally was right in front of you. Those spirits were literally right in front of you.
They boarded the dog somewhere too.
Idiot.
They had to work most of the weekend, moving me down to take care of it.
Fuck,
Without ever seeing a dog in the driveway through the basement window during the time that everyone came to the woods. I hear heavy steps across the length from the kitchen on one end of the house to the other brothers and my bedroom. Then stuff. My girlfriend confirms she hears it too as she looks at me and says she's home. I ran up to the kitchen, don't hear anything, door's still open. I go into the living room, grab a knife and start searching. Nope. All windows have been locked. All doors too. Nothing disturbed. nothing really ever happened. Don't let people hurt you. Didn't happen to me on my end. Always the same stories about yourself or other family. We lived in a small town with a bridge connected to a small town in Always my family lived up. While my auntie dropped me and my sister went off at our house around 5 a.m., she was heading back towards the city and left the only road was also down the car. She stopped at the stop sign and reached for her purse and pulled off the passenger side. When she looked at me, hair covering her face, it came her out of the door. The same thing happened to another lady in the community town around 3 a.m. But they saw me when the police broke the house and they were finding me out. Here's the legend I heard about the island fever with my family. Living on a small island with a local church, there are a whole lot of scary things happening wherever you know and it's not a fact. Let me tell you something. I was coming home with my boyfriend that day, and we were just relaxing in bed watching the sun. He was on the left-hand side and I was on the right side, so I got up in bed and put my phone face down on the right side of the bed. It was easy at least 2 photos. I was going to massage his back as I walked around the house. I saw my phone from the TV around me. As I went over to the TV, my phone just suddenly fell from my hand. I was instantly shocked because I was walking in my room, so I couldn't have just dropped it on my face. He looked back at me and also was very confused, asking me if I was going on my phone and making me feel I told him, and we just started trying to replicate the exact moment that we just took. Everything we tried, all possible. Literally just as I told him, I just came to the road level. He asked me what it looked like on the app, and I said it looked like something his face, and actually agreed with me because we never seen anything like someone was looking on our phone. We spent half an hour trying to find logical reason. I'm just more concerned with the phone that looked like our phone, not even once did the phone ever tell me what happened. I have no clue what happened. I know this isn't exactly what happened, but this is the most unexplained thing I've ever had. I got lost. Like many, I've always been skeptical of ghost stories or similar supernatural accounts. I found them interesting and creepy, especially from family that had no reason to lie about it, but it was never convinced me. I just didn't know what to do. Probably still the same road in the end, but something happened to me that I was not experienced before and surely never will. My grandmother passed away from my early days. She was the only one who was and her health had declined slowly until she made a few surgeries, and then things escalated for the last few months until it was too much. She lived across the USA from me, and I visited a lot growing up, but in the later years we would only talk every now and then. She was by no means a tech person, mostly used a landline and very simple flip cell phone rather than any type of smartphone even in 2014 or so. I am certain she never had any Apple products and probably didn't know or care that I did around that time. This will matter soon. I got the news she passed away, grieved with my family, dealt with her estate, and maybe a year or so had gone by at this point. I distinctly remember laying in my bed waking up from a dead sleep to an incoming FaceTime call from her house number. Her name lit up on my screen. Confused, I answered the call to see simply a still, blurry white image of some kind, like a phone camera placed face down on a white surface too close for the camera to adjust into focus. I say hello? Still trying to understand what's going on, and only after a few seconds do I hear a female voice call out hello. Who are you? How did you call me like that? The voice was clearly decently far from the phone, maybe across the room. I explained that I received a call from this number, and the woman responded that I was the one that had called her and she doesn't know how it accepted without her doing anything. She sounded a little scared, like honestly creeped out that some guy's face and voice just started coming out of her phone without being anywhere near it. Once it was clear that both of us didn't know what happened or have any business with the other, we hung up. I lay there with shivers running down my spine for a good few minutes. Told my family, who also didn't know what to make of it. If I had my wits about me, I might have asked if she had recently got this phone number, but she was so understandably weirded out I'm not sure she would have volunteered that info. No idea what to make of it. I've never told anyone this story as I don't think anyone would believe me, or assume I was exaggerating. I'll let whoever reads this be the judge. Back when I was 13 to 14 years old, I lived with my parents. I would be trailed along with them to Tesco every Thursday evening to do our grocery shopping. One normal Thursday night I went to bed. For context, we lived in a 2-bedroom semi-detached house. My bedroom was above the kitchen. Anyway, I settled down to go to sleep when suddenly I heard the kitchen back door, which leads to the garden, we pulled and pushed. Almost like someone was trying to break into it but couldn't. I froze in bed trying to understand what I heard. It was around 10 p.m. and both my parents were still downstairs, so I couldn't understand why no one was doing anything. I assumed it might have been one of them coming back in from the garage or something, so being a kid just forgot about it. That was until every Thursday night after shopping it would happen. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it did. I know it wasn't my parents, as one evening it happened when both of them went to bed. I went through every rationale. Maybe one of them had got up. Maybe it's the boiler. Maybe it's someone with us. But nothing made sense. I was an awkward kid and never thought to bring it up to my parents. But it got so bad that I would get terrible anxiety on Thursday, as I knew this aggressive and forceful noise would commence when I got to bed. People will say it was my imagination, and if I was genius, I'd assume the same. But I know it wasn't. You know when you just know the sound of something in your own home? Well, this was one of them. But why did my mom or dad never react to it? Last night, I woke up slightly panicking after having a weird dream. As I sat up, I noticed there was someone sitting on my bed watching me. And the thing is, I know 100% that it wasn't my mom or stepdad, and it wouldn't have been my brother, as he was only 2. After a few minutes of just both of us just watching each other, the person put a hand on my shoulder, gently pushing me back down, and tells me to not worry about them and that they mean no harm. When I got later on, as I was getting ready to head to my bus stop, I told my mom about what happened, and she said that she had some similar happen where she woke up and saw someone standing in the main hallway of our apartment. And what's weirder is that I couldn't see who it was, but I got this feeling that they had been in my room with me before, and also that I know I wasn't still dreaming, because when I dream I never feel anything physically, and I felt that thing bad. First, the setting. We moved into a home built in 1983, located along a creek bed near the former post office. A full house of Australian First Nation people living in Boston. After moving in, my 10-year/old daughter kept insisting there's a room in progress, claiming that things were falling off the shelf when their own curiosity, stating she could feel a presence, feeling afraid to be in the room alone, etc. Of course, me being a practical man, just figured her imagination was getting away with her until this night. I had just settled into bed when there was a knock on the door. It was my daughter crying and stating she didn't want to sleep in her room because she said there was a person in her closet. So, I got up and went into her room and did the usual, opening the closet, looking under the bed, sitting with her for a minute, asking her if she felt better. She said, "No, Dad, there's still someone here," and pointed towards the blank interior wall.
Nope, that's
the wall, and started barking angrily at the wall, like bloody murder barking, like he was going to kill or shred whatever it was he saw. There was no noise in the wall. It was late night, so no noise or vehicles outside. Just nothing at all for my dog's behavior. Normally he would never bark like this or show aggressiveness like this.
Dead.
And then after about 2 seconds of barking and growling, he just laid back
any
down.
opinion
Apparently his mission being
on
accomplished.
spirits.
Needless to say, our daughter slept in our floor that night. To this day, I still have no explanation for what occurred, and I still get creepy vibes in that area of the house occasionally. Had a dream in my teens. I was walking around my house and a girl in an 1800s nightdress was hanging in my mom's sewing room. A miner from the 1970s was there too, but he didn't know he was dead, but I told him and showed him out of the basement. Walked down the road into a light, felt good.
Oh.
Couldn't get the girl to leave, unresponsive. Then the wall behind rippled black, like a wave down the floor. I mean the whole wall, and I ran upstairs back into my bed. Never ever saw my mom behind the stairs. Had other dreams of walking around my house, but never saw the girl with the black wall. Also used to have blackouts and makeup in places. Not really conscious of how I got there / what was going on. Still
Someone's
chunks
an
of my
neuromancer.
Doesn't happen anymore, but super unsettling. Not as good as some of the other ones on here, but one day when I was younger, 2nd or 3rd grade, I lived in an apartment complex when me and my friends, 3 of us, would play every day, and my friend had just gotten a camera for his birthday. So we went around taking pictures, and it was getting pretty late, and we knew our parents were about to call us to get inside, and my friends out of nowhere start screaming, and I look for the cause of their screams. When I do, I see this shadow figure that's quite tall. I think maybe like 6 or 7 feet. And that's when I told later my friend told me what happened when we were taking pictures. And they caught a photo of the cat. I can't really find other words to describe it other than human head that had no skin and you could see inside of it. After that day, my friends decided I still remember even years later.
Wonderful.
My friends moved out 1 to 2 months later, which caused me to not go outside. But I still can't believe what I saw that day. Bit of a backstory. My sister was and worked part-time at an antique shop. One of the items happened to be a foggy mirror which would not come off no matter what they would do. My sister decided to bark at it like an idiot and they started hearing footsteps to the point where they thought someone broke in. She brought it home and decided to focus on my room. The first instance was the knocking. My desk is faced away from my door. I was watching video and heard knocking and called out for my sisters to come in. I thought they were playing a prank when I saw no one there and went back to my videos and heard the knocking again. I went to my sisters who were watching a movie with me. When I asked them what was the movie, which freaked me out because I know they wouldn't lie to me. So I replayed my video and heard no knocking in it. After that, I continued to hear some knocking on my room door and bathroom door. It's a very distinct knock and my sisters are very violent when they enter a room or knock. I had sleep paralysis, but hearing other stories from it, I didn't open my eyes. One night I was asleep and suddenly woke up without a reason.
That's not sleep paralysis.
My headphone I use for my console emit a light and shine on the walls near it, and one wall happens to be directly across from me. I woke up and turned to face the wall direction across from me, which is right by my door. A dark male figure was standing at the edge of my bed. I immediately pulled out my phone for the flashlight and saw no one there. Everyone was asleep and my dad leaves at 1 a.m. for work and it was past the time. A vodka bottle in the kitchen fell from the fridge when no one was near it and it was on the center on top, so there isn't an explanation I can think of that it would topple over. I still hearing knocking on my door and bathroom still, but it mostly settled down.
Well, he did. Fucking idiot. I don't get chills or frightened easily.
If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment.
Hello, viewers.
What are the most scary, eerie, and unexplained mysteries you have ever experienced? I've got a couple. When I was about 10 to 12, a neighborhood buddy and I were camping in the woods. In reality, we were a couple acres behind his house in some forest that backed up to a state park. But that was about as close to camping as we had one of his family dogs with us, a beautiful and very protected mutt named Abby. She wasn't the type to startle easy. In the middle of the night, we started hearing movement in the forest, and Abby started growling and sniffing the air, probably an ear real soon, until we unzipped one of the windows of the tent to look outside and clearly saw a human figure in the mud. It seemed to be standing by the tree. We understood ourselves and decided to try to get our hands on an old-fashioned from the abandoned campsite. As soon as we opened the tent, Abby bolted at the figure, who ran off into the night. She eventually made it back by morning. The other one is much shorter, and a bit more restrained. I grew up in the South, and a lot of late summer/early fall nights it was too long to get really super foggy. My maternal grandfather turned his old family farm into a subdivision where I grew up, so he knew the area well. We were always warned about deer when we started driving, because they were all over the damn place. I was around 17 to 18 and driving home one night in the fog, fast and invincible as teenagers are. My grandpa had died a couple of years earlier, and I swear I heard him say turn your brights on, more in my head than anything else. I was startled one day as I was told, and there was a group of deer crossing the road that I never would have seen otherwise. I didn't say anything about it to anyone. The next morning, outside my bedroom door, my mom had put a pack of those deer whistlers that you put on your front bumper to scare deer off. My mom had a dream where my grandma told her to buy me some. That one still comes up in conversation 15 years later. When I was 6, my grandparents took me to this.
Hey, you know what? He's just looking out for his kiddos.
There were skits about resisting the devil, sing-alongs for Jesus, gymnastic exhibitions for Jesus, guys in karate gear-breaking boards for Jesus, things like that.
No, thank you.
In between the acts, the presenters would give small speeches about how important God is and how the devil's agents were among us, waiting to harm us. One thing stuck with me because it was really grim when told of how Satanists were kidnapping people and eating them.
That's just not true.
Found a hell house, and in that house was a witch's cauldron filled with human body parts coming from a young man.
That sounds like some shit that y'all would do.
The boy had been kidnapped, tortured, and murdered, then made into a stew that the Satanists ate to give them magic powers. The presenter told us kids. This was the summer of 1980. Years later, curious, I looked up the incident.
But like,
a student named Mark Kilroy had, in fact, been kidnapped, tortured, murdered, and put in a cauldron by a cult leader and his followers in order to give them immunity from the police. All the details fit, except that this happened in March of 1989, the year after the youth revival. How did the presenters know about the murder? Were they talking about another murder? Or did I end up in a Christian theme time slip? I asked my grandmother. She said she had no idea what I was talking about and denied ever taking me to a youth revival. All these years I've never been able to explain it. New house, new town, new land. About 2 weeks into settling, our dog goes missing. She's an old lab and neighbors warned us about dog nappers in the area, so we didn't take any chances. My dad goes looking towards the square. My mom stays at the house and I go into the forest in our closet. It's about sundown that I only make out the shape of the trees and anything around it. About 5 minutes of walking the house and then the sound of the dog calling Jingle. I called to her and she was silhouette come rushing towards her, alarmingly fast. I was calling her in front of me because I figured she must be too excited or something. At the time I figured it must be home since there's a time. Not taking any chances in the new place, I break into a runback and the gate that separated our backyard from the forest. I'm only a few feet ahead of her and the back patio of our house comes into view, and I was already planning on immediately shutting the gate once we got through. Then I saw her at the patio. My dad already found our dog. She was at the town square the whole time. Without a second thought, I didn't even open the gate and jumped over that fucker and kept running. Whatever it was that I thought was our dog came to a halt against the fence. I didn't look back and just kept running until I got to the patio. When I finally looked back, there was nothing there. When I explained this to my dad, he said it was probably just some hogs. But I know I heard that jingling sound that comes from the dog tags, and that creature looked exactly like my dog. To top it off, I never saw that thing again. But we did have some animals disappear when they left us for a Sunday. About 20 years ago, I dropped off a friend who was hiking a section of the Appalachian Trail, and decided to hike for a couple of days while I was there. I had my glider back and hiked over the Northern Mountains, planning on doubling back and crossing paths to say goodbye to my way back south. The trail was on a narrow ridge among a grove of, I think, hornbeam's large trees with smooth, white bark. The hill fell away rather steeply on both sides of the trail, but there was one little level area where a campfire ring had been placed, and enough room for a couple of small tents. I got my camp set up, which was late, it being summer. I stayed under the small fire until about 10:30 p.m., and read by flashlight in my tent for maybe a half hour more. At around 3 a.m., I was awoken by what sounded like 1,000 small silver bells jingling. I was far up onto the trail that I wasn't near any road, and hadn't heard any road noise or other man-made noise all evening. My heart was racing. I checked my watch and grabbed my camping knife in one hand and my hatchet in the other. The bells continued, sounding faint for about 20 minutes. I stayed awake, full of old school adrenaline until sunrise, moving about 3 hours, straining my ears the whole time. Had planned on hiking more and camping one more night, but no got a bear. I don't remember this, but it gives me the creeps. When I was little, around 3, I had an imaginary friend that was a clown. All was well until one day I came inside crying to my mom and told her the clown was being mean to me. I was having some issues and the clown would come into my room and be mean to me. So to help me not be so freaked out, my mom made a no clowns allowed sign and taped it to the door. Things were okay after that. But one day, my mom was doing my hair and gave her back to the house. I looked at her and said to me, "He's right behind you." She said she was struck and didn't put it out. I was terrified of clowns till she took me to a free show circus act where they showed clowns putting their makeup on. So yeah, I had a best friend imaginary clown who turned evil. I used to be on a search and rescue patrol. We had a very strange call one night around car crash in the middle of the rural area was reported by a nearby resident. But when emergency workers showed up, the victims were nowhere to be found. So we showed up to the scene and at the end of a very long road there was a 90-degree turn but a night. The car was clearly going at a very high speed, missed the 90-degree turn, hit the embankment, flew through the air, and the front of the car hit the ground so hard it gouged out a pretty sizable road fire. The windshield showed two shattered broken signs where the passengers had hit, covered in blood and paint. There was more blood than the bottom of the car. The scene was brutal, and taking the fire survival of the crash was just like giving an animal condition to the car. We expected to find bodies nearby. Police dogs, firefighters, and now an entire search and rescue party was not able to locate the victims after several hours. As night set in, we began to get more uneasy. There was no clear looking for us, but no bodies were found. Finally, after about 3 hours of searching, there was a 911 call to Canada and reported a blue dead body found in a medical pickup truck in a rural home driveway. A family was coming home from vacation, and when they pulled into their driveway, they noticed the body and immediately called 911. So 2 police units dispatched from the search to respond to the call. We all assumed this would be the end of the story. Well, the police showed up to the house and to everyone's surprise no body to be found. Somehow the body had vanished. There was blood, but no sign of anything else. So a second search radius started from that house. We searched practically the whole night. We were called back the next morning and nobody ever found the bodies. We eventually called the search off. To this day I have no idea what happened. I had a cousin who was pretty normal and had the first 8 years of life. One day out of the blue she started throwing me and got outside very well. Big and not that much. Eventually my aunt got her to tell her why. Apparently whenever she went near the woods or open area she'd see huge clouds of herself there very close. Eventually she said it started coming out raining and telling her she's going to settle down. These were pretty dark things coming from a young person. Then she started saying she'd see kids come open her door at night and stare at her. They'd shut the door and leave her in the pitch black until she passed foot from fear. She said she saw the wolf's eyes glaring at her from the closet. Now I stayed at my cousin's house because me and her older brother were always hanging out. In her older brother's room there were tiny child-sized handprints on the ceiling above the bed. We assumed it was from my little cousin jumping on the bed and touching the ceiling, even though she wouldn't possibly be able to get that high. We tried painting over them, but they showed through every time. Super creepy, I never felt safe sleeping there anymore. Eventually my aunt got the church involved with my little cousin because she started saying the wolf was everywhere. At family gatherings, in the woods at my grandparents' house, up north at the cabins for our family vacation. The pastor came to their home and blessed the house to cleanse it of anything evil. Then one day it all just stopped. My cousin's in high school now and still scares the piss out of my adult self retelling these stories with new details I never knew. Crazy experience overall, but I'm glad she's better now and nothing ever followed me home. A few years ago I was hanging at my friend's house. We often would grab a pack of beer and chill on the porch until later in the night. Nothing weird ever happened, except this one time. I still get chills thinking about it, and it will for sure go forever unexplained. Anyway, we have quite a few raccoons around town, and it seemed the family must have lived around his house because we would see them around. One night, there was a slight dusting of snow on the ground, and we saw a raccoon come down a tree across the street and go into the business parking next to it. It looked a little too big to be a raccoon, and at that point we weren't wasted, but had enough drinks to be curious about. My friend is a pretty large dude, not fat, just a big one, so I felt safe enough with the both of us. We go across to the parking lot and see the tracks. They did look a little big, but not totally abnormal. There is a little covering of a walkway from one building to the next where the snow stops. But we notice around the back there is a little path in between the business and the fence of the house next door. The roof doesn't come over this part, so there was a little snow there too. This is the part that put chills down deep to our bones. We still don't like bringing it up. As we get closer we notice prints again. But they were not animal prints, they were tiny human footprints about the size of a 2-year-old, I think. I don't really know kids' feet that well. We got the fuck out of there and ran back to the house. Can't remember if we called it a night after that. But nothing like it has ever happened to me before or since that event. It still gives me chills when I think about it, and I can barely talk to people about it. If anyone knows any paranormal creature this could describe, please let me know. I was about 9 or 10.
Of a child.
One night, I woke up cause I was hella thirsty. Went to the kitchen, had my water and came back to my bedroom. Thing is, as soon as I walked in, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I was feeling unwelcome in my own goddamn bedroom, so I just ran to my bed and then the old monsters can't see me if the blanket is over me. I waited like that for a few minutes and suddenly, I shit you not, I felt something slash somebody pushing down on my head. 2 times. I got out of bed as fast as I could, the blanket still over my head cause I was afraid to look. Slept in my sister's bedroom that night. To this day, I still don't know if it was actually real or if I imagined it, but I still get the creeps when thinking about it. I once else saw a shadow figure try to crawl into bed with me. I was sleeping in the house's attic at the time, so it was extra dark and had the added spook factory of the vents behind the walls. For a while I wrote it off as sleep paralysis, but the thing that convinced me it wasn't was the fact that while I couldn't move my limbs, I was able to speak. It was hard and it took a lot of effort, but I did whisper go away to the figure. It paused, lifted its hand off my bed and simply backed away. Then it turned to walk down the hallway. I even heard it step on the creaky spot on the floor. It had a very distinct sound that couldn't be mistaken for simple house settling creepiness. What made it creepier is the fact that my mother and grandfather both had their own stories from sleeping in the attic. My uncle slept up there for a while too, but all I ever got out of him was a chuckle and an "oh geez, do the aliens come from you too?" For context, my grandfather always described his experience as 6 tall thin guys trying to carry him down the hallway, and he told them to put him down, he ain't going nowhere, and so they did. My uncle was on a History Channel Ancient Aliens binge at the time, and the joke of a failed abduction stuff. I wouldn't say that I believe in anything specific, but I guess
Shades are not.
Both my parents just say that I've always had
Shades don't have that ability.
On my mom's side, we're descendants from the Aztecs and some Indian tribe, and my grandma is convinced that because of it, every other generation has strong spiritual connection, especially related to dreams and sleep. I don't know how much I believe her, but weird shit that I don't want has a way of finding me. I get sleep paralysis on a regular basis.
Too bad, so sad.
And when I do sleep, I go straight into REM sleep, so I can chalk it all up to that, or it could be connected. Who knows?
Nope.
I've had a few really unsettling experiences with sleep that could be paranormal, especially since I was living in 2 100-plus-year-old Victorian houses right after another in San Francisco and Oakland since I was a baby to about when I was 14. Those are different stories though. One summer when I was maybe 13, I went to stay at my friend's house across the country in NC. I was getting terrible sleep paralysis about every night for weeks. My friend and I shared the same bed since we were really close, and she was a heavy sleeper, so my issues didn't usually keep her up too bad. Well, I remember one night I got the best sleep I had in a long time. Like all the sleep I lost caught up and I was just out. After that night she kicked me out and I had to sleep on the couch the rest of my stay, and she told me some excuse that I didn't think much of at the time because I assumed she just needed space since I jolted in sleep too. My sleep paralysis and overall sleep habits got worse when I got back home again, and by the next summer I could kind of control it because I could feel the weird staticky body numbness coming before it happened. I don't know how else to describe it. I thought we would just go back to sleeping in the same bed, but she finally told me why we really stopped. Apparently that night I got really great sleep. She woke up to see a ceiling-high black figure looking down a not window and stayed there until she managed to sleep. She didn't want to tell me because she knew the sleep paralysis already kept me from sleeping most nights, and she didn't want to scare me. She refuses to sleep in the same room alone as me to this day, and I don't blame her. She's never gotten sleep paralysis or any sleep issues, and I've never hallucinated anything on sleep paralysis, or at all, other than feeling an unwanted presence, so it really chills me to the bone. I want to say I was around 13
I don't
or 14
ever get that.
It was late, and I was having a tough time falling asleep, tossing and turning. Suddenly I hear a sound coming from the kitchen, glass clinking against glass. I was confused because none of the lights were on in the hallway on the way to the kitchen, and I didn't hear or see anyone walk by my room. At first I just figured one of my parents went without turning the lights on, but after listening carefully I hear their snoring coming from their room. I also knew it couldn't be my sister because she was scared of the dark. So at this point, I'm listening intently as I can still hear shuffling in the kitchen like someone is setting something down in the
dark
sink.
is beautiful.
After a little while, I hear footsteps heading towards the bedrooms, slow and steady. I can hear as it changes from the tap sounds on tile to the distinct sound of stepping on a run back to tile. Now I'm fucking scared. Covers pulled up to just under my eyes, goosebumps all over, and heart racing. It's just on the other side of the wall heading towards my door. Then I hear the taps on the wall, like someone tapping with their nails slowly getting closer to my door. By the time it gets to my door, I'm wide-eyed and have them glued to the entrance of my room. I didn't see anything, but almost as if it was right next to my bed, I hear a female voice whisper, "I can see you." When I was younger, maybe my mother and her ex-boyfriend started to get into EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, and wanted to see if they could contact spirits. I was always skeptical and still am, but would join them when they did their sessions to listen and be near my mom. The house I had lived in had been a multitude of different outfits converted to apartments, and the most outstanding one was that it was a woman's reformatory, basically an old prison for females, a long time ago. The apartment we lived in was small, so my youngest brother slept in a crib in the living room, which was directly adjacent to my mother's room where the EVP recordings happened. My mother and her ex never really got anything concrete. Bangs, loudish static, but never anything else. One night my mother asks what's in the room, and my 3-year-old brother, who was barely forming sentences, from a deep sleep says, "Don't go into the woods so calm and crisp." I still shiver at without it. I lived in an old farmhouse for 2 months. My ex-girlfriend's dad was there and me one day and saw an old woman staring at me from the second story in the middle of the afternoon. There were no other occupants in the house at the time. He was a burly, tough farmer guy, and he was freaked out quite a bit. I was surprised he would admit he was scared out of his mind. Fast forward a little, turns out one of my family relatives had built the house and lived in it. They had a mongoloid son or something and had him locked in the shed. He wasn't allowed in the house. My mother and my 3 aunts had visited and stayed the night there for some reason in the 60s when they were little girls. It was just a coincidence when I was older where I was living at the time. My mother still remembered how awkward it was. My girlfriend at the time had slept upstairs in one of the bedrooms while I was out of town. She claimed to see an old woman in the middle of the night looking out the window of the bed. She slowly turned around and stared at me. Then she ran out screaming in the middle of the night and vanished. She refused to stay there anymore and moved out the next day. I slept a bunch of nights there and never saw anything odd as the farmhouse was still there. My sister lived there briefly after. She lasted maybe a month before she said, "Fuck this," and left after hearing loud noises and ran the whole breeze in the house in July. They caught in Missouri in July. We were scared. I lived in the country, thank God, and my neighborhood only had 8 houses. We all knew each other but mostly stayed private. Anyway, I was about 13 and after getting home from school would head to my bedroom to play video games and do homework until my mom would come home. I have to have a door shut whenever I am in a room. I feel like I am being watched and it makes me very uneasy to leave doors open. Quite often my bedroom door would just slowly open. It clicked shut and you had to actually pull to open, but yet it would just swing open like nothing. I also heard my mom call my name frequently, except it was just me. My mom was still at work and I could hear her calling me crystal clear. I often would hear people talking downstairs, again, while my mom was at work. The one day I heard our sliding glass door shatter. I ran to my parents' room and grabbed the shotgun my mom kept next to the bed. It was just me and her and I was a very responsible kid who knew not to fuck with guns. Also country living y'all. My heart was pounding and I had my finger next to the sat being away from the trigger and gathered all my courage to go down the stairs. My house was set up so that the front door was immediately in front of the stairs and you could turn right to our den and dining room, or turn left and do down the hallway to the kitchen and family room with the sliding glass door. It was basically a pretty open loop with an open staircase. I had the gun in front of me at the top of the stairs and called out, "Get out and listen." There was some glass crunching and no silence. I slowly walked downstairs, nearly pissing myself, and made my way towards the family room. There was fucking nothing, glass door still intact, no broken windows, nothing. I ran back upstairs, put the gun back, and cried. The last time I stayed home alone was because I was in my room after school waiting for my mom to get home. We had no pets, no air conditioning, nothing that made sense for what happened. I was playing a game when I hear a loud boom. My floor shook and my door flew open so hard it dented my wall. I ran out of that house so fast I forgot my shoes and the front door locked behind me and I couldn't, and didn't want to, get back in. My mom came home a few hours later to find me sitting on her doorstep crying. She found a babysitter and I stopped staying home alone. My sister lives in the house now and has absolutely no issues. I still get occasional weirdness in our home my husband owns. We went to Hawaii 1 year with my husband, his sister, our husband, and his parents. When we got back, we were chatting with my neighbor who commented that they saw my husband's father come into our house while we were away, with his dad. They got quiet and refused to talk about it further. The power was out, and the Incredible had just come out, so my parents took us to the movies. We came in the door coming home, and I remember my dad was joking about what superheroes we would be. I was one boy and my lanky sister was stretchy, of course, when we heard a little girl laugh from inside. I mean, this is the unmistakable tinkling laughter of a 5 to 8 years/old girl, and it was very directional. It was 3 syllables, and I'll never forget it. We all went silent, and my dad pushed my mom, and the 3 of us kids slowly back out onto the porch without saying a word. He whispered wait and went back into the house with the puppy flashlight we left by the kitchen/porch door. He didn't find anything, but funny enough, he acts like it never happened. My mother and older sis would tell the exact same story I just did. The house is isolated from neighbors by several acres. We still don't have a clue what it was. I bought a hand-carved cedar First Nations flute secondhand a few years ago. Was traveling around the Gulf Islands on the coast of BC and brought the flute along with me. I had only bought it a week or 2 prior, so was still learning the different notes and how to properly play the instrument. The host of the farm I was staying in had a friend over who was skilled in playing a variety of instruments, so I asked him to give it a go and see what he thought. It was around 1 or 2 in the morning at the time, and we were sitting in the living room of an old cabin surrounded by forest, with other cabins scattered throughout the forest, but far enough that the night was silent. When I passed the flute to the musician, he took a few moments to admire the details in the carvings and asked where I got it. After I told him, he began to try a few notes out. After about a minute of playing, he stopped and looked it over again. When he put it to his lips again, he played 2 different notes, long and clear. He paused after playing the notes, and the room was filled with silence again. From what sounded like the distant forest, all 3 of us heard the exact same 2 notes repeated in length and tone. No one said a word, and we all kind of looked at each other with a silent acknowledgement of what was happening. He put the flute to his lips again, and played a single note but higher pitched. After pausing for a moment, we heard the note repeated again. This happened once more with 2 different notes, and at that time the host was pacing the kitchen. He noticed the notes were somehow coming from the dishwasher, in a frequency that sounded alien to the machine's usual sounds. An odd and anticlimactic ending, but all 3 of us agreed afterwards that it was more than a coincidence. Still can't think of a logical explanation and don't see the need for it. I've lived in houses growing up that were blatantly haunted and have had quite a few terrifying experiences that cemented my belief in supernatural experiences. The house that this story took place in was built in the early 1900s and is known in the community for having a spiritual presence. Also, all 3 of us were sober at the time. Actually, this just happened to me a couple weeks ago. I was home alone. My mom works about half an hour away and texted me around 15 minutes on my way home. I had just finished working out and decided to take a shower. Side note, I have a fairly big dog who is super sweet, but she does bark at people whenever they're walking in the street. She also gets really excited whenever anybody comes home because she's adorable, and you can definitely hear her. Anyway, about 10 minutes ago, I heard the back door close. I thought it was odd, but I was like, whatever, maybe my mom's text that made it. I also found it strange that my dog hadn't made any noises. I finished up showering, walked down the hall, and heard a strange whirring noise from the basement. My dog was totally passed out on the couch. I opened the door reluctantly, and found that all of the lights were off. Pushing my towel to me, I turned on the stair light and made my way down. I then turned on the light to the main room and saw a Ford car that led me out to forever driving in circles around the road. Anyway, it's a remote-controlled car. It's been kept on a shelf for at least 10 years. I snatched the car and sprinted upstairs to throw a TF away, and after I closed the door and chucked the thing into the garbage, I distinctly heard the sound of a woman laughing. My mom got home a little later and was still freaking out. We went downstairs and checked the whole basement, but no one was there, and all doors and windows were still locked. I couldn't find the remote control for the car. Late that night, while my parents were fast asleep and snoring, I heard my dog growling, which is quite uncharacteristic of her. I convinced myself that maybe she needed to go out, but when I went to the door to use my room, I saw my dog sitting calmly in front of the basement door, still growling softly. So one time I decided to go to stay at my friend's house for the night. It was pretty cool. We got stoned all night and munched out. I was really tired, so I took a nap in her grandpa's room, and it was really comfy and slept like a baby. I wake up in the middle of the night to get a drink of water. Couldn't fall back asleep, so I just lay there for a bit. I get up to use the bathroom, and I don't know why, but I decide to look out the window, and that's when I fucking see it. A man in all black, with his hood up, just standing 4 feet away from the house. I couldn't see his face because the lamp outside was casting a shade, but I was fucking tripped out and had to look twice to check if what I was seeing was really there. It was. I go wake my friend up and tell her what I see, and she just tells me to go to bed. I look out another window and he's still there. I tell them, and her boyfriend says to just go back to sleep because whatever is outside is nothing you should worry about. What the fuck? There's a man standing outside and they don't care. I sleep with them because no fucking way am I sleeping alone in that house. This is one of the most creepiest things that has happened to me, and I still can't explain it. When we were younger, my friends and I used to sneak into a cemetery called Bachelor's Grove. Look it up, once of the most haunted in the world. Being bored high schoolers, we thought we were badasses and nothing scared us. I'm telling you, you don't know what fear is until you walk into that place. I mean, your hair is on end before you get to the entrance. It's bizarre, like an overwhelming feeling of dread. One time we were there, I heard a little girl screaming. Mind you, it's 11:30 p.m. and no houses for about a mile. Another time there was generators thrown into the ground. Yeah, a lot of people over there check it out sometime if you're ever in SW Chicago. Also, a friend told me a story about an old nightclub in Chicago in the 90s/00s called Excalibur. At the end of the night, they had been watching the tapes, and right there in the middle of the dance floor, a night packed to the core, were 2 little girls in old-fashioned clothes playing jump rope. If by chance anyone in the female or even a slimmer chance has it still, please do. I used to work with my stepdad doing general contracting. We did a big variety of projects: drywall/painting, roofing, flooring, and some small plumbing or appliance installation projects. We were working at a private middle school that remodeled a wing of their campus, and it was our last day, so all we really had to do was general cleanup and some finishing touches. We just finished painting some drywall patches we made in the teacher's restroom the day before, so now we could finally put the electric hand dryer back on the wall and wire it up. I was in the hallway outside of the restroom, and my stepdad told me he was going to the hardware store to get some self-tapping screws, and then he'd be back soon. At this point it was just me, as they turned off the power for the entire wing and no students and teachers were allowed around the construction, and my stepdad and I were the only workers on this job today. As I was touching up some spots with paint, I heard a really short scraping noise, almost like a metal toolbox across concrete. But only for like a second, so I go into the bathroom and see the disconnected hand dryer, one of those Dyson regulators, which are so good, on the cabinet. I could have sworn I didn't leave it there, but it was a long week, so whatever. I set it on the floor near the sink since I was going to reattach it to the wall. I went back into the hall and heard that noise again, but again only for a second, so I figured it was someone outside. I go back into the bathroom and the fucking dryer is up against the other wall. No way someone could have gotten their car that was right outside. Now I'm kind of weirded out because we have no lights or anything on, and it's just the daylight coming in from the hallway windows. So I open the door all the way to let some light in, and I start mounting the dryer again. As I walk back into the hallway to go to the breakers to turn them back on, that was the last thing we had to install, electrical-wise. I hear the dryer start up and turn on. Now if you've used the Dyson Airblade, it has a very distinct sound, so I know what I heard. But the power was still on. I ran to the breakers and flipped them on, turned on all the hallways and bathroom lights, and called my stepdad to say we were good to go. I was done. So a few days later they call our boss and he says there's something wrong with the hand dryer, but he's trying to so he's going to take a look. We get a text later saying you guys forgot to reconnect the wires for the hand dryer, and nothing else like that know what was done. Stepdad heard my story, but I could tell he was skeptical. I wish I was making it up. In 1997, my husband, 6-year-old son, 2-year-old daughter, and I lived on Floyd Avenue, Rome, New York. It was an old rental house. My daughter loved to run around the supporting wall in the middle of the house. It was open on both ends to access the kitchen and lounge. She would run around it, stop, turn, and run the other way giggling the whole time. It kept her and us entertained just watching her chase herself and have so much fun. One night we were all in bed. Me being a light sleeper, I heard my little girl, who must have snuck out of her little bed in the middle of the night, giggling and toddling around the wall. I got up to put my cheeky little girl back in bed. I didn't turn lights on as everyone was sleeping and the moonlight was enough to see my way. As I approached the rooms with the wall, she was toddling on the other side. I playfully whispered, "I'm gonna get you, my little monkey." She stopped in her tracks, so I peeked around the wall to grab her before she took off again. She wasn't dead. I thought there's no windshield snuff around the other side of the back of the stood side, so I spun around only to see her 30 feet down the hallway fast asleep on the bed. I checked both kids. Both were sleeping deeply. Freaked out, I returned to bed, woke my husband and told him. As I explained what just happened, his eyes got big and he said that's who she's been chasing. After a sleepless night, we packed up and moved the next day. Never found out who she was playing with and she was too young to remember. I had cancer as a child and lost my eye to a rare infection. I had to have a bone marrow transplant to cure it as the infection began feeding into chemo. I spent a lot of time there suffering and death blows. I had seen him before when I was young. People didn't see him unless they wanted to see him. They are the uneasy feeling you get when you're alone. The things you see out of the corner of your eye. Shadow people. I've seen them 4 times in my life. The first when I was under the age of 8. We were living in a small 2-bedroom house and the head of my bed gave me a clear view down the hall. I woke up feeling like I was being watched. I rolled over and there it was, a feminine form in the doorway. It was the color of that weird darkness you get when you rub your eyes a bit too long, kind of a dim flashing /thrill. I couldn't look directly at her, neither could I any of the others I saw. It was like looking at star in the night sky. You have to look to the side of the star to see the full light of it. If you look directly, it kind of fades away. I thought it might be my mom, so I called out for her,
Nope.
but it just stood, watching. I watched it for a few minutes and it turned and walked away. I didn't see another one again for several years. I was at my grandparents' house in a room I hadn't started in before. I stayed up reading a children's Bible story book and sent to bed a bit later. I had the same feeling as before. There was someone in the room with me. I was about 11 to 12 at the time.
Whoever this
I
is, I
wasn't afraid of
remove
the
your
dark,
celestial
but I'll be damned
resonance
if I
and
wasn't
damn your
scared of it that
bloodline
night.
to the abyss.
I checked the closet, the windows outside, even under the bed. Several times at that. I couldn't shake the feeling. I laid back down and there they were, 2 very large silhouettes standing at either end of the bed. They had the same color/effect as before, just darker. I could see through them, but it was like everything was shaded behind them. Part of the dresser was darkened by the lack of light. The rest was I was petrified by fear. I started praying, but they weren't sleeping by the order. They seemed to feed off my fear as they kept growing larger. They even grew larger than the room itself, as if the physical weren't an obstacle. I kept praying,
No,
and eventually
it's
I
not.
feel this warming sensation throughout my body, like someone poured warm honey in my chest. I then felt instantly asleep. The 3rd time was when I was in the ICU. My grandma wanted to come over and pray over me, and I wasn't too thrilled to entertain guests while in my deathbed. She came anyway, and they all laid hands on me. I closed my eye and saw the outline of the door leading into the room. I thought I just looked at it too long and it was a burning image. Except the door opened, and out walked a shadow person. I thought it was death. I thought it was my time. My life flashed before my eyes, all the happy times, all the mistakes I had made. It kept walking. I didn't want to die. I never even kissed a girl. It reaches out for me. I can't leave my mom. Its hand reaches up and touches me. I physically feel it. The prayer is over. I open my eye and close it, but it's not here. The door is gone. I asked if someone touched me and my grandma said she did. I woke the next day knowing I would survive. It wasn't a question of maybe. It was a solid effect of the sky being blue. The last time I did anything to move, I realized as my nurses were prepping me for transport to the bed. There were at least 6 shadow people surrounding my bed. No one could see them but me. This time, they felt like they were there for a good reason, not the fearsome sights I had seen years before. I began to notice a different silhouette in the room, a bright white one. It sat in the chair to my left, but it wouldn't let me see it completely like the others did. I could just make out an outline along with legs from the knee down. They stayed watching over me until it was time to go to surgery. My buddy and I were having a smoke in front of my house around 1 a.m. Suburban Missouri. We were chatting normally as fellow humans do when all of a sudden we start hearing some dogs barking in the neighborhood. Loud enough that we kind of trail off the conversation listening. Then the barking picked up, louder and more dogs it seemed like. The conversation came to a dead halt as we both realized this wasn't normal. Suddenly, a terrible noise started to crescendo what seemed like a block away. It sounded like sustained car crash, metal grinding awfulness. And then, lights. Swirling lights reflecting off the back of homes a block up. This whole experience happened within about 20 to 30 seconds and then, nothing. The lights and sound immediately went away and the dog stopped barking almost on cue. My buddy and I turned to look at each other wide-eyed and pale. turned back to look at where the lights were coming from, and saw two glowing cat eyes staring back at us. My friend knocked out, and I went inside my house and didn't sleep that night.
That's a
That was 7 years ago, and I think about it daily. This was around the year 2000 before cell phones were ever present. I was in high school when this happened, and I've never been able to explain it to my satisfaction. I woke up late for my first class. No big deal, I figured I would just skip it and carry on with my day. So I get up and glance at the clock in the kitchen. It's the same time as the one in my bedroom. I make breakfast and actually get to watch a show I rarely see because it begins after I leave. I found this via the TV Guide channel where they also list the time, which I noted. I timed my departure so it arrived right as my first class was ending and I'll have time to hit up my locker, etc., etc. I get to school and immediately see my two best friends. We chit-chat and I ask if I missed anything. They seem confused and ask what I'm talking about. I tell them I'm an hour late. They tell me school hasn't started. I look out the window and I swear it started and when I arrived I was 1 minute late. I went to my first class thoroughly confused and it remained that way ever since. It was not anywhere near there. Maybe I was sleepwalking, but that doesn't explain away how to get. I checked many clocks in the house. Somehow I arrived before I left. The time was right, I'm sure. Easily the eerie thing that has ever happened to me. Rainy night in July a few years back and was in a car with 3 other friends on the way to one house. 2 of my friends aren't paying attention. One is driving, and I'm watching the road. We turn onto the road when I see what appears to be a deer on the side. Then I think, that's not a deer, it's a man running across the street. Suddenly he gets to the middle of the road and just disappears in the center. Mind you, I didn't say anything about what I saw, but as I'm thinking about what I'm seeing, the driver starts slowing down and says out loud, "Oh, a deer." No, that's a guy. Wait, now he's gone? And I reassured her I also saw the same thing. Spent the last 2-minute drive to our friend's house freaking out over what we saw, tell our friend's parents about what happened, only for them to tell us, oh, a man was hit and killed by a car down there last July. This happened about 7 years ago. I don't believe in the paranormal or supernatural, but this was the strangest thing I have to say I've ever experienced that I just can't explain. At the time I was in college and had started working as a runner for a law firm. The current guy that I was going to be replacing, he was going back to college after the summer out of state.
That's what real paranormal activity looks like.
The incident occurred on the 3rd floor of the Hines County Chancery Courthouse in Jackson, Mississippi. We were walking back to the elevator after dropping off paperwork with the clerk. As we round the corner, we see one of the elevator doors begin to close and there's a guy in the elevator. Nothing looked out of place about it in any way. From the glance we got, I just assumed he was probably returning. We were close enough that he could have held the door open if he was inclined to, so we got a decent result. Anyway, elevator doors closed, so we hit the call button and wait on the next one. Except we didn't have to wait. Not 5 seconds after the other runner hit the button, the elevator door to the elevator had just closed open back up. Except it was empty. The elevator didn't even leave. It wouldn't have had time to. From the time those doors closed, we hit the call button and it opened back up as maybe 15 seconds. So he and I both got on the elevator and started going back to the first floor. And while we were there, I said, "You want to explain I saw a guy in here when the doors closed on another walkway." And the other runner immediately started freaking out and said, "Holy shit, you saw him too?" Apparently we both thought we had to have been imagining it at first, but we started describing him and we definitely saw the same person. I have no answer, and as far as I'm aware, the courthouse doesn't have a reputation for being haunted or anything. In the following 3 years I worked at that firm, I rode those elevators in the Chancery Court over 100 times and never had anything strange like that happen again. And this was the only thing I've ever had happen in my life that I would consider possibly in the realm of supernatural. Otherwise, I have no explanation for what happened. And someone else saw it too, so I know I wasn't just imagining. I was driving home from work very late, around 3 in the morning, on an empty freeway. All of a sudden a car came up out of nowhere, right behind me so that their lights were right in my mirrors blinding me. I kept speeding up to get the lights out of my eyes and put some distance between us, but he kept speeding up almost immediately. Finally I reached up to adjust my rear view mirror and suddenly the light disappeared from all my mirrors at once. I look in all 3 mirrors, turned all the way around in my seat to look, but the car was gone. The freeway was in a big city, well lit, and I could see both sides of the freeway a fair distance back, but there was nothing. There was no exit for at least a mile in front or behind me, so there's no way they could have put the exit. And even so, I would have seen the lights disappear to one side if they pulled over instead of disappearing all at once. It's such a random thing, and everyone I brought it up after to laughed it off. But to this day, I can't find any explanation for the disappearing car. If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what is the most paranormal or unexplainable events you have witnessed? The town I grew up in had some nice falls about a half hour away, and on the way there, when you're on the state park grounds, there's like this big wall. There are steps leading up to like a picnic area with a great view. I've been there loads of times with my family. One night, I was staying at my best friend's house. His older brother and girlfriend were there, and they wanted to go to the falls at night, so my best friend and I went. When we get close and we're about to pass that wall, and as we're driving by it, we all saw a little girl. She couldn't be more than 10 years old, wearing pale dress or something, standing near the line separating the road from the shoulder where people would pull over and park to go have a picnic. We pulled over after we saw her. There were no other cars anymore, and the girl was gone, and we just looked around, hoping that was just nothing. Personally, I would have thought I was just seeing things, but literally everyone saw it too. Enough for the older brother to say, "Was that a little girl?" As he was pulling over. Lechusa, described to me as a rich-black Albion. The legend I heard when I was little was that if you were outside late at night and you could free time, Lechusa would come and snatch you. When I was around 20, I shared this story with my friend one night, and we kind of joked around about it along with sharing other paranormal stories. Eventually, I have to grab something from my car outside. It was a beautiful, clear night, very quiet, and we were kinda out in the country. While I'm searching the trunk, my friend lets out a whistle while standing next to his front door. He was laughing, knowing it freaked me out, and let out another whistle. I was a little pissed, and he was screaming at me and tried to hurry up because I was also a little creeped out. Then he let out a third whistle. At the exact second his whistle stopped, I heard this loud, terrifying screech right above my head. It sounded exactly like an insect echo. Look it up on YouTube. I was immediately startled and looked to my friend. I thought he made the noise to fuck with me, but his face was looking back at mine in terror. When I saw his face, I knew it wasn't him and booked it into his house. When we got inside, we kept repeating, "What the fuck?" Whoa. I figured it was just an owl that mistook the whistle for a squeaking rodent, but it really freaked me out considering it followed the legend I heard with the 3 whistles. Shared this story with another friend years later, and he wanted to try it and did. But nothing happened. Now I sound crazy low. Oh, I have lots of these. But the most terrifying one was 8 years ago. I was 19. I was watching TV on the couch, alone in the living room, when I felt someone looking at me. It was that chill that runs up your spine, a suspicion. I looked back and I couldn't believe it. There he was, this huge, very tall shadow man. He seemed to be wearing a hat, and he was purely shadow. Pure blackness, as he was made out of the void. And I didn't just catch
No,
a
he was made of shade, not of void
energies. Looking at me with no eyes. Trying to seem
shade-based energies are way different.
Cold weather, loneliness,
way different.
My mother was having a rough time. She was very depressed and emotionally unstable. We had been fighting a lot during that time. I could feel he was there for her. He wanted to scare me. I started to pray, though I wasn't religious. Turning to ask guardian angels to take him away, to protect me and my
life. Oh
no! I couldn't move.
Angels do not guard.
Eyes closed, still feeling his presence. Until I could move again. I turned off the TV and carefully went up the stairs. I was afraid of being pushed out. As I was walking up, the whole staircase became involved in a thick, odorless fog. I could barely breathe. I started to pray again. Sat on my bed, terrified. The fog dissipated and I lay down to sleep. And as soon as I closed my eyes, 3 bright flashlights flew before my eyes. That's when I said fuck it, grabbed my pillow and went into my sister's room. May I sleep on the floor? Surely, why? There are dead people in my room, okay? I studied a bit and learned that flashlights are usually when they're upstairs helping. My sister wasn't phased because things like that are not old news around here. Everyone in the family is psychic. My mother, my father, myself, my sister, my cousins, aunts and uncles, 2 of my grandparents.
Well,
it's a recurring topic of conversation in my family. But I won't lie, I've had a few experiences, but the most concern that I have is when my aunt, my which we never did. But she said she would come home in her mats in her bathroom and be thrown all over. Then later on she was woken up by a voice that said look over here, and she did and saw her keys jingling by the door. She said she rolled over the door to pretend it wasn't there. She moved out shortly after that, so the room was empty. Afterwards, my ex and I saw/heard weird things from that room. One time I was in the living room and heard the shower curtain slide open, the door close on its own, heard movement that shouldn't be there. My ex started using the closet in that room to get changed while I was sleeping since he had to be up at 3 a.m. He said one morning he went to get his uniform and his clothes moved around before he touched any of them. After all of this, a friend and I hung out in the room with a recording device trying to do ghost hunter shit. We did capture some noise from the bathroom, but the only voice recorded that wasn't ours said shut the door. When I was in junior high school, I was good friends with a girl who had seen mental health issues. She was smart but had been held back due to absenteeism, whether that was due to appointments, hospitalizations, truancy, not sure. She frequently talked about Jen, a type of demon in her culture. She grew up in Iraq and her family had been persecuted. She might have had PTSD, recalling some other behaviors. She was completely positive Jen had followed her from Iraq, and it was why her family was haunted by bad luck. Her father's anger, their poverty, her mother's sickness, her own nightmares, failing grades, and sadness.
You know, you wouldn't even have any of that. You wouldn't have any of that if you were literally, if you were literally giving them fucking...
The air felt thick and oppressive.
Giving them shit.
I pretended to be asleep and it was dawn in the morning. Obviously, it was some of the things that were dark and I didn't know everything covered in dust, and the silhouette of the family. But at the time, because my friends always ran in rage and convinced about misfortune from the game, I was convinced it was a less than better.
I don't get that. But the two we had were the only ones with batteries in them. It repeated again, but with more clarity. Come find me in the pantry. The only place we assumed the voice was talking about was the pantry, which was a pair of sliding metal doors with slits in them, much like a locker in the laundry room. We opened it, but it was only food. It repeated again a couple times, before stopping away or becoming unintelligible. It was infrequent in the intervals it was happening. It was seemingly random, but interrupting conversation over what the heck happened. We did talk over the walkie to ask who this was, but there was only the